across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good evening. It's just gone 7 o'clock, so it's time for the Evening Exchange. Over the next 3 hours, we're going to bring you right up to date with everything that has happened in the UK and beyond today, particularly that counter-terrorism officers have taken over the investigation into Ann Widdecombe's murder. Now, the point is, why on earth were we told previously that there was no terror aspect of it? That's what they ruled out. They've also ruled out, and appear to be continuing to rule out, a political motivation. I'd be pretty sceptical about that. They're saying don't speculate, but the problem is if we're given incorrect information by the police and then they contradict themselves, well, who are we to believe? We also are hearing about Shabir Ahmed, about that absolute scumbag, the Rochdale grooming gang leader who will hopefully be deported to Pakistan in the House of Commons. At the moment, the Home Secretary is dealing with that. She's also finally banned the IRGC. At the moment, Priti Patel, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, says it's about time. My question to her, as it was a few weeks ago when she was on my programme, was, you were Home Secretary, why didn't you do it under the Conservatives? Lots to discuss on all of that. Also the fact that Ollie Robbins, remember him, the Foreign Office Permanent Secretary, senior civil servant there, is to sue the government over the Mandelson scandal sacking. He says he followed orders and shouldn't have been sacked. That could be a costly one there as well. We'll be on the debate desk with Joe Wheeler and Sean Hickey, as we usually are on a Monday too, but as well as what they have to say, we'll hear from the independent reviewer of counter-terrorism, that is Jonathan Hall. He will be on a little bit later on and says the police have broken their golden rule when it comes to the information we were given about Ann Widdecombe. We'll speak to Isabel Oakeshott in a second too and get her take on all the big stories of the day. I want your take as well. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell, send me a WhatsApp voice note, send me a WhatsApp text message, or give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. So much to discuss between now and 10 o'clock. Let's get going. It's Monday the 13th of July and so much to discuss. Now then, we've had this really fascinating and horrendous development actually today, in that Devon and Cornwall police were steering the public away from the idea that Ann Widdecombe's murder was a terrorist case. We now have Jonathan Hall, KC, he's the independent reviewer of terrorism legislation. He says they probably broke one of the golden rules of investigations. He said earlier on in an interview, and we're speaking to him a bit later on in the programme, I don't know why they simply didn't say they had an open mind as to the motivation. I think they probably broke one of the golden rules of investigation, which is not to comment on live investigation in case new facts emerge. I think it is something that really does affect the national security of the country, he said, in regard to MPs being protected. We're going to talk about all of that with Isabel Oakeshott. She's our international editor here at Talk. Isabel, good evening.
Good evening.
What do you make of what Devon and Cornwall police have said here? Because we have people criticising Nigel Farage and others for speculating, saying that shouldn't happen. The former Justice Secretary for the Conservatives, Sir David Gauke, saying people in public life should know better than to speculate publicly. But what happened was that so much of what various people were saying, hold on a second, if someone, and he is a suspect and he hasn't been charged, but if someone is going to drive over 200 miles to someone's home, perhaps there's a terrorism aspect here, perhaps there's a political element here. It doesn't appear to be a random attack. What do you take out of this now that the counter-terrorism policing South East is leading the investigation? A big U-turn for Devon and Cornwall.
Well, I'm massively frustrated by it because I think it just undermines public trust in the police even further. It just seems to be a pattern that whenever there is some massive horror in our society, whether it's Southport, whether it's the Henry Novak killing, and now this, the police are less than straightforward with the public about it. And it's much better to say nothing at all than to mislead people. And they continually emphasised over the weekend that there was no political dimension to this. And I can tell you that Reform's leadership, Anne was a member of our party and worked very closely with the Reform Party leadership, were not at all convinced that there wasn't some kind of political dimension to this from the outset. It was just too strange. Of course, I should emphasize, we still don't know exactly what's happened here, what the motivations, we really don't know. But what we do know, I think we can trust this bit, is that the whole thing has been taken over by counter-terror, which suggests that it isn't just a, well, random, or some other very strange explanation. This is really, really serious. And yet the police told us when they couldn't possibly have known. Time and again, they told us there is nothing to suggest a political motive. And common sense, given who Anne was and all the kind of facts about her that are in the public domain, common sense definitely said it's quite likely that she was targeted for her political beliefs.
Let's hear what Devon and Cornwall Police have been saying today. Assistant Chief Constable Matt Longman said this.
We retain primacy of this investigation and detectives remain open-minded about the potential motive. At this stage, there is nothing to suggest that it was politically motivated.
So we're still saying not politically motivated. Shabana Mahmood has been speaking as well about this today, the Home Secretary in the House of Commons.
I recognise the particular concern that the Reform Party will feel today, and of course Nigel Farage, the party's leader. I'm happy to offer a meeting for Mr Farage with the chair of RAVIC, the independent body within the Home Office that manages the security of those in public life. And I will also be looking at what security guidance can be provided to former members of Parliament, which I hope to work with you on, Mr Speaker, as well as those who serve a party outside of this place.
Many questions, including from the Deputy Leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice, who paid tribute to Ann Widdecombe as well. This is what he said.
We're all reeling with shock, sadness and anguish at the loss of our Ann, and also the manner in which she has been taken from us. She was a colossus in public life, in political life, a legend adored and loved by millions and millions of people. She was an incredible orator who always spoke without notes. Absolutely remarkable. And in 23 years, she made over 8,000 contributions in this place, and some remarkable witty interventions. When an honourable member said that she should disappear with her broomstick, she immediately replied, "I have my broomstick and I will cast a spell over you." Her conviction, her passion and her advocacy for free speech was to be commended. I had the honour of working with her for the last 7 years, and despite being a foot taller than her, I somehow always found myself looking up to her.
Richard Tice, he also asked Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, if she would keep them updated about security for various members of Parliament, including Reform UK. Lindsay Hoyle, the Speaker, talked about this in Parliament as well today.
Just for the record, every member of Parliament is equal in the security to me. There is no difference between any member, I want to assure you. When things are brought to my attention, because we don't discuss security, I don't put out there what is happening, what has been done, but I reassure everybody that when it is mentioned to me, it is passed on to the security people to deal with. Unfortunately, I'm sorry that people don't think I do that. Lucy Pell.
The Speaker reacting to criticism there, including from Nigel Farage. I mean, that's not true, Isabel, is it? Because we have at least 6 members of the Cabinet who have 24-hour protection. That is different to being a humble backbencher with very little protection outside the House of Commons. They can request police protection for example, constituency surgeries and so on, but it's not as if every member is treated equally as the Speaker appears to be suggesting there.
Well, our system is a bit strange on all of this. For example, all prime ministers continue to get a lot of security, all former prime ministers, I should say. I'm not sure that's always merited. I mean, I don't want to say it isn't, because it's not my area of expertise. But when you think, well, prime ministers that have not been in the job very long, are they still, from a long time ago, are they still of equal risk of attack as, for example, Nigel Farage? These are difficult judgments, and I suppose underlying it all is the horrible feeling, and we had a brilliant security expert on one of our shows on Talk this afternoon. It's a horrible feeling that in a sense it doesn't that much matter how many bodyguards you provide someone with. Bad stuff can happen at the hands of crazy and deranged and mentally ill and vicious people. And it just seems to me, you've been around a long time, Peter, as I have, it often seems to happen to the least expected person. You know, it's sort of like, if you'd said someone from Reform is going to be targeted in this absolutely grotesque, shocking way, how many people would have said, I think it'd be Ann Widdecombe?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think any.
Exactly.
So, you know, we can go to the ends of the earth to try to put protection around those that we think are most vulnerable. And of course, we should do the right thing by those that obviously are higher to risk of being targeted. But I'm afraid that we're still going to have tragedies. It's not to say it's a counsel of despair and don't even try. But I'm just being honest when I say that I just feel that people are going to go on being vulnerable.
Yeah.
And there are so many different reasons for that, aren't there?
And we don't want our politicians to be inaccessible. We don't want, I mean, one of the things I love about this country is you can walk into Parliament and say, I want to lobby my MP, quite literally in the lobby. You can go to a constituency surgery and make an appointment and see your MP about something that they're doing. It's not like in America, it's not like in various other places like South Africa, for example, where many senior politicians are very remote people. I wonder if we could talk about what else the Home Secretary has been up to today. The UK banning support for the IRGC, long overdue.
Yeah, finally. Finally. I just wish they'd do the same for the Muslim Brotherhood.
Yes.
I don't think they've yet done that. And yeah, I mean, it's a welcome thing that will be drowned out because really there is only this one story in town, but it feels as if it is a move in the right direction. I'm just stunned that it's taken this long. I mean, how? You know, the countries in the Middle East don't allow this, and yet in the UK we've just dragged our powers that be have dragged our feet on this. It does seem very strange, and we need to go further and look at the other organisations that we still tolerate that, you know, well-run countries in the Middle East will have no truck with at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you make of this former senior civil servant, Ollie Robbins, suing over the Mandelson scandal sacking? He says an apology would have been all right, but actually he's suing for unfair dismissal. He's also rumoured to be perhaps going to be brought back under the Burnham administration this time next week.
Well, I mean, I remember listening to the evidence he gave to the committee, and I thought he was very measured and professional and all good things about the civil service. And I do feel, just without being an expert in, you know, the forensics of it, I think he was a scapegoat, wasn't he?
Yeah,
he was a
I agree.
Sacking him was just a desperate attempt for somebody to be seen to pay the price, you know, to try to save the political figures. So I can understand why he's he feels pretty hard done by, and why he might be taking the moves that he is.
Yeah. Isabel, thank you. Always good to talk to you. Isabel Oakeshott, our international editor on Talk. Appreciate you contributing. Bob says, as a former police officer, I can pretty much guarantee that the comments made by Devon Police at the weekend were aggressively suggested by the Home Office, especially given who is in government at the moment. Great show, says Bob. Dave in New Zealand says, let's face it, the police don't work for us, so why should we work for them? All you small business owners refuse to serve them. All you tradies refuse to work for them, or triple your quote, says Dave. Well, I think there are a lot of good police officers out there, Dave, and there are many at the top who perhaps should do their job in a very different way. One of them is Sir Mark Rowley. Brian says, with the trust in police at an all-time low, isn't it about time for reform of the leadership? Starting with the Metropolitan Police Chief, Sir Mark Rowley. And Zarina has been in touch, says, I do not recognise my home. A lovely, ageing, legitimate politician and celebrity murdered, whilst a multiple rapist of very young, white, innocent children has left to roam amongst us. Talking about Shabir Ahmed there. We are led to believe that we have no choice but to keep him here, despite that he is from Pakistan. The authorities knew this day would come when he was released, and once more they're on the back foot. R.I.P. Ann Widdecombe, says Zarina. Lots more to discuss. We'll go to the debate desk in a second. Joe Wheeler will be with us, as will Sean Hickey, regulars, of course, political commentators both. We'll see what they think. I'd love to hear what you think, too, of the big stories of the day, particularly that investigation on Ann Widdecombe and the prescription at long last of those dreadful people in the IRGC in Iran. Some breaking news as well. Nigel Farage turned down taxpayer-funded security, including a bodyguard, car and train driver last year, according to the I-paper there, talking about this. The Reform UK leader was offered the protection following police advice and the threats he faced. He had already been receiving publicly funded security prior to this and felt the package had been downgraded. It would have given Farage a similar level of security to Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch and some high-profile cabinet ministers. He declined the offer because he considered the protection to be inadequate. A Reform spokesman suggested Farage needed stronger protection than the leader of the opposition, telling the I-paper he is the most targeted politician in Britain and only party leader that actually actually goes to meet the public in huge numbers on the campaign trail. The spokesman also denied Farage rejected protection, adding he declined a downgrade and inadequate package. That seems to, I didn't know the full details, that's new to some degree, but certainly when it came to what was offered to Nigel Farage previously, he then decided to use some of the money from Christopher Harborne or other money that was there within reform coffers for his security, which is extensive and is, not to go into any detail, but you know, I've seen it, he has got 24-hour security, and he said publicly that he needs that for the rest of his life. That is a breaking line from the I newspaper. Caroline Wheeler, their political editor, is claiming that as an exclusive. We'll talk on the debate desk about that and about the security of our public figures, particularly MPs, in light of that shocking news last week on Ann Widdecombe and the debate that was had in Parliament today. What do you think of all this? 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to everybody who has been in touch, including Roger in Chichester. Gosh, I'm not entirely sure what happened there. Thank you very much to Roger, who says, Isabel looked clearly upset. Ann Widdecombe was so loved and respected, so I can understand how Isabel feels. Millions do too. There are clearly a lot of people hurting about that, a lot of people very emotional. Richard Tice as well in Parliament paying his tribute. I think he was pretty emotional too. And indeed on the station last Friday as well. I don't know if you saw him on the breakfast programme. Speaking of MPs and their security, Nigel's been in touch and says the former MP Mike Freer for Finchley and Golders Green, who had a strong support for the Jewish community, was never given police protection, walked around with a stab vest. And indeed his office was targeted by anti-Semitic violence as well. So very good points there all. And we're just reacting to this breaking news from Caroline Wheeler in the I paper. She's the political editor, talking about Nigel Farage turning down taxpayer-funded security, including a bodyguard, car and train driver last year. According to the I paper, he was offered protection following police advice on the threats he faced. He has been offered a meeting with the chairman of RAVEC, which is I can't exactly remember what that stands for, but it's about security and protection of MPs and high-profile people anyway. Now, he has said through his spokesman that Farage needed stronger protection even than Kemi Badenoch. The spokesman said the most targeted politician in Britain is Nigel Farage, the only party leader who actually goes out to meet public in huge numbers on the campaign trail and has decided to pay for it himself. On the debate desk now, the broadcaster and meteorologist Joe Wheeler. Hello, Joe. How are you doing? You well?
Yeah, good, thank you.
Good to see you. And the head of content and politics, Joe Sean Hickey. Hello.
It's good to have my name remembered this time.
Yes. It's not that I didn't remember. I was thinking about other things, Sean. I was thinking about other things.
Preoccupied.
On this, yes, exactly. On this big issue of MPs and their public protection, this is interesting about Nigel Farage. Now, we were told that this downgrade was in the public domain, but he certainly feels that he needs even more enhanced protection than the leader of the opposition. Is that wise, do you think, Sean? Is that the right course of action?
I mean, it's certainly what he's been saying for the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
That's why Christopher Harborne's given them the $5 million. But I think it is true. I think, objectively speaking, someone like Nigel Farage is probably the most significant politician that Britain has seen in the last at least 100 years.
He must have higher name recognition even than Andy Burnham. I mean, I was speaking to someone last week actually who's been in a lot of different focus groups where they talk to people, and a lot of people just don't know who Andy Burnham is. You know, they know who the Prime Minister is, but once you get into who's the Home Secretary, things like that. I mean, Nigel Farage is, all of our viewers and listeners know who the Home Secretary is, I would imagine, but when it comes to Nigel Farage, he is just one of those people who people know.
Well, there was a very long period of time where he had more name recognition than Keir Starmer. Now, whether it's in a balance now is a different story, but certainly in 2020, he was a far bigger star in the political scene than someone like Keir Starmer. So, I mean, but alongside that comes a lot of his infamy as well and his divisiveness, and I think when someone like him is saying that he is the most threatened politician in the UK, I think there's probably some truth to that.
I think we have to believe him when it comes to that. The question is what the public should pay for. What do you think, Joe? Because I would personally, I mean, I'm, as I often say, I'm politically homeless, but I think we can see, even I'm not a security expert, but I have been around a number of people who, within my professional career, who've had 24-hour police protection, and it's clear to me that Nigel Farage should get that from the taxpayer. What do you think?
I absolutely agree. I believe there was a conversation with Keir Starmer at some point about Farage's security, and he was like, nah, we'll be fine. If I've done him wrong there, I apologise.
It is up to this committee, this RAVEC committee. But,
which is the same committee that Prince Harry's been begging to for his security. So I think it's Royals and VIP, something along those lines. There is no doubt that a party like Reform, and indeed Restore, actually, so I'd put Rupert Lowe in the same group, you know, if they are saying things that are controversial to the current narrative, then yes, then they should have security, because they have a right to that view. You know, whether everybody else agrees with it or not. You know, Nigel is all about stopping the boats, reducing migration, and if that is an unpopular view, it's an unpopular view.
But I suppose the question is, where does it begin and end? Because if you're out of politics, but you're a high-profile person like Ann Widdecombe, should she have had security? I mean, where does this kind of end? And Isabel made a really good point where she said if you had heard, you know, someone in Reform UK had been attacked, you wouldn't immediately have thought of Ann Widdecombe as someone who would be open to attack. And there are lots of people who are high-profile former politicians who have no security whatsoever. You used to sometimes see people walking around London or in the Tube or wherever. And I just wonder where it should begin and end. What's your thought on this, Sean?
Well, I mean, certainly there are sitting MPs like Diane Abbott, for example. I think she has more death threats and abuse online than all of the female MPs in Parliament put together. And she was kind of spearheading that conversation today in the Ann Widdecombe debate, that yes, it's horrific to see, and also we're very early on in the investigation. We don't know whether there were political motivations, whether it was, even though there are the counter-terrorism police investigating at the moment. I think you certainly need to start with active politicians and then work down from the risk towards... I mean, I think with someone like Ann Widdecombe that hasn't been an MP for quite some time now, it is a surprise to see the circumstances of the last couple of days play out. But I think certainly it's active and then you move back from there.
Yeah, and what do you think, Joe? Because, I mean, there are people who happen to be in the public domain who have stalkers, for example. There are people who... I mean, I remember there's a guy I went to university with, actually, and his... family had been on a reality TV show called, well, I'll not say what it was because it wouldn't be fair to him, but it was one of those like reasonably well-known reality TV shows back in the day. This was like 25 years ago when they were just kind of starting out. And he just happened to be a teenager. His family lived in this house, and they were, you know, followed, and it was on TV. And for years afterwards, he had this guy who turned up all the time at various things, and he wasn't kind of threatening, but it was something to worry about. And that just happened to be someone who was like a character in a reality TV thing that kind of ran for 8 weeks or 10 weeks or whatever it was. So it's kind of random, the sorts of people who feel they need to either stalk or attack or target people in the public domain. I mean, I get some of it as well. I don't ever feel my life has been in real danger, but I have had death threats. So it's one of those things that is kind of in the back of your mind, but it's not something you think is a daily reality.
No, it's not. I think it's taken much more seriously now. I think Emily Makelis had a fairly serious stalker.
That's right.
And, you know, back in the day, I had one or two. Luckily, never came to anything.
You've had it yourself?
Yes, absolutely.
Right, okay.
And what I do know is you go to the police and there's nothing they can do. Until they do something, the police can't do anything at all.
Okay.
So I think things have changed from that point of view. Was Ann Widdecombe receiving any threats? Very hard to say. Did she say so?
Reform UK have said they're going through all their emails and correspondence, you know, the people who might have emailed through the website or whatever to try to assist the police in all of that. So they'll be building up this picture, and that actually is part of the discussion, isn't it? Because we were told previously there's no terror aspect to this at the moment anyway, and then they've done a complete 180 on that, saying there now is.
Well, yes.
In their view.
And this person apparently, you know, drove many hundreds of miles with a wooden stick to go and do what he did. I think the whole thing is a little bit odd.
What he allegedly did,
yeah, what he allegedly did. You know, but ahead of Ann Widdecombe, we had David Amos, we had Joe Cox. You know, these things do happen.
Go back further, Ian Gow, Ari Neve, people like that as well were targeted.
And you know, even Nigel Farage, he had a milkshake thrown at him. On that occasion, it was a milkshake in the cup, but it could have been anything else.
And Joe Brand, of course, joked that it should have been acid, and there was no sanction against her. It is a real worry. Where do we go from here, Sean, do you think?
Where do we go? I mean, it's certainly a difficult one when you're talking about your previous anecdote about the reality TV show.
It can be very random.
I think we're in a society, particularly whether it's politics or whether it's lifestyle, entertainment, that there is this kind of blurring of the lines. And I think the one thing with politics is that people's lives are affected by politics. And I think when you're looking at how you've got incidents like Ann Widdecombe, David Amos, Joe Cox, all in the last 10 years, that there's something seriously wrong in British society, where there have been 3, at least, instances of very serious offences against active politicians that we then, I think, need to start looking at who politics is serving and to what end, because I think you're looking at a lot of stuff here now where there's a lot of people. Now, I'm not endorsing any of the actions of anybody that's been involved in any of these instances, but there's something fundamentally wrong with the environment where people feel like the only motivation or the only way that they can get their law or fix the issues that they're confronted with is to go out and attack an MP.
But so much of that is about trust as well, and feeling your voice actually matters. Very interesting message from Nat in Tel Aviv. He says, everyone and their dog tweeted on Friday the police stating there was nothing to suggest the killing of Ann Widdecombe was politically motivated or related to terrorism, made that it was indeed politically motivated and likely related to terrorism. And there we go again. And police wonder why people have lost trust in them, Joe.
Well, I agree. You know, people are being arrested or, you know, being challenged over social media posts and all the rest of it. There are various people who would have stood, you know, for a seat and haven't because of this situation, because they don't feel safe, because they've got death threats. Sorry, if somebody's sending death threats either through a direct message or social media, why aren't the police taking that uber seriously when they are taking any other social media post, you know, as seriously, if not more so? You know, I also had the opportunity to stand for a local seat. I decided not to. For that very reason, I thought, no, I don't think I would deal with that very well. I wouldn't.
And we're putting good people off politics as a direct result.
Exactly.
Thank you to everybody who has been in touch about this. Chris in Newbury says, what I find incomprehensible about the UK is a centre-right politician murdered in her own home, and yet the newspaper go for an exclusive gotcha on one of the most threatened politicians in the UK. That's the left's response. Try to gotcha Farage. That is why MPs are in danger. The media is intensely focused on demonising their political enemies. Chris, I'm not sure I actually agree with you on that. I think the paper is perfectly entitled to do that story. I think that's perfectly reasonable, and it does give us a bit more detail. We do know from Nigel Farage that he turned down the downgrading, and that is, I'm not entirely sure. I mean, Caroline Wood is a very good journalist, but I'm not entirely sure how new that is. And the spokesman is in there saying he's the most targeted politician in Britain, and he declined a downgraded and inadequate package. So I think it's probably fair enough, Chris. But listen, if I'm wrong, text him again. We'll have a look out. I'll ask the top team behind the glass to look out for Chris and Newbury's messages. And if you want to reply to what I've just said, please do so, and we'll see if we can read that out. Brian says the Home Secretary should have the Pakistani government in no uncertain terms take this criminal back, Shabir Ahmed, or we will stop the £114 million in aid, stop all visas. Why on earth we are giving a country that can afford a nuclear programme financial aid is beyond me anyway. We'll talk a little bit about that in just a second on the debate desk with Sean and Joe. If you want to get your voice on the air, please do give me a shout. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks everybody who's been in touch. We'll get back to your calls, text, tweets and voice notes. Just a quick word on Shabir Ahmed, who is the scumbag he was sentenced to 19 years, served 14 for running one of the worst grooming gangs, rape gangs in Rochdale. We're now trying to deport him to Pakistan. The Home Secretary has been talking about that. He, because of, it's not quite a loophole, but he came to this country before citizens could be deported to Pakistan. He's been here for a very long time. Joe, your thoughts on this? Will we get him out? Do you think that's possible?
Surely, if he's now being convicted today, yes, can he not be deported under current laws, or would we need to change them?
He can't because he's been here too long. He was here before. There was a sort of 1973 cut-off, so he's been here prior to that. And they're attempting to change the law retrospectively, but it's a difficult thing to do, Sean.
Yeah, I mean, with Shabana Mahmood at the Home Office, I think there will probably be a solution to this at some point. I think anyone in Labour circles has been looking at what Shabana Mahmood has been doing, and she seems to be quite strong on the Labour right of immigration policy.
The Pakistanis are pushing back. It'll be very interesting to see what happens. We'll talk about this more later on in the programme. We'll make sure we bring you right up to date with it. Let's talk about another matter, which is about the UK. Finally, speaking of Shabana Mahmood, actually, banning support for the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The Conservatives have been very hypocritical with this. Priti Patel has said it's about time it happened. Priti, you were Home Secretary, you could have done it. I put this to her a few weeks ago when I interviewed her, maybe it was a couple of months ago now, and she said, well, the context has changed. I don't think the context has changed that much, to be brutally honest. What do you make of this, Sean?
Well, I mean, to be fair to her, the context of there being a war with Iran has probably changed.
Yes, but the IRGC were not nice people, ever.
Yeah, no, I do agree with you. I think it's an interesting one to look at after all this pressure for so long that we're now essentially just scribbling over the initial policy and then going, actually, no, we will prescribe them. It's important to remember alongside this as well that a 190,000 strong army from a country that the UK considers an adversary is considered the same as a group like Palestine Action. So it's very interesting to look at how the terror legislation and who we ban and who's
Would you
condemned.
not ban Palestine Action?
I wouldn't go as far to say whether I would or wouldn't, but I do think it is quite bizarre to have an organisation that is supported by pensioners in wheelchairs and being dragged away.
It's also
for
supported by
it.
people who take iron bars and batter policemen and women and cause, you know, hundreds of millions of pounds worth of damage to planes. Like, they're not cuddly.
I think that was that was looked at again, wasn't it? The damage to the plane at the RAF site.
Yes.
I mean, it was fully operational a day after the paint job.
Yeah, but
whether that's terrorism
still
on par with going to Golders Green and attacking members of the Jewish community.
Well, attacking a police officer with an iron bar, as a member of Palestine Action did, is terror. It is a terror offence and was convicted as such, and rightly so.
I mean, there are differences in opinion when it comes to what Palestine Action as an organisation do and what individuals that say that they're members of Palestine Action.
Well, they were.
do.
I mean, they went through a court case because an assault was made on a police officer. So, I mean, they were Palestine Action people. That's part of the reason.
There were people, but this is grey area as well, because there were people within that case, weren't there, that got off for it. Now, I'm saying that there is, that instance in particular was a horrific incident. No police officer should be assaulted in the line of duty. But when you're talking about an organisation that, in their manifesto, it is saying that they would like the United Kingdom government to be fully supportive and fully compassionate with the genocide that's going on.
It's not a genocide.
Well, according to the UN, it is.
No, it's not. It's not according to the UN. It's not.
Well, there are reports from the UN.
There are bodies linked to the UN that are suggesting it's genocide. The International Court of Justice, the United Nations as a body, has not said that it's genocide. So this is a familiar fiction that says that it's genocide. It's not. So what happened was the death toll in Gaza has been agreed by Hamas, by the Israelis, and by the UN as 72,000. Hamas themselves have given pensions to 50,000 families of Hamas terrorists. 22,000 people are innocent civilians. Dreadful, wouldn't want it to happen, but that's not a genocide. That is not killing huge levels of people. That is not destroying an entire civilization, because Israel could have done that in 5 minutes if they wanted to.
Well, they have been doing it over the last 2 years, and they have been doing it since 2003.
There are nearly 2 million people in Gaza, and they've killed 20,000 civilians in a war which was started on the 7th of October.
But do you think that things like having, this is before 2023 as well, things like having calorie counts for the amount of people that they think are in Gaza to make sure that the population is kept on the brink of starvation?
They've said today that Hamas is stealing the aid. So, and there are 3 times as much food that were needed for the people in Gaza. I mean, how many genocides are there where the perpetrator, as you and others would put it, bring food to innocent civilians? That doesn't usually happen.
Have they been doing that since 2023? I think it's been
on many occasions.
It's been well reported the whole way through. I've spoken to people from UNICEF that have been on the ground in Gaza for the last 2 years that have testified to the fact that food aid was being held in Israel, that was waiting at border crossings.
Yeah, because it was being stolen by Hamas.
But the UNICEF were transporting it in and out. Are you saying that UNICEF are Hamas?
No, I'm not saying UNICEF or Hamas, but UNRWA are riddled with Hamas people who are the UN body for the Palestinian people. That's a matter of fact. They've just sacked a number of people who have been working with Hamas and Hamas operatives that have been there. So the aid has been pilfered. That is the point. That has happened on numerous occasions, and you still haven't answered the point, which is, show me a genocide where the perpetrator, as you would put it, would bring, or at least attempt to bring, aid to the people they're apparently committing a genocide against. It's not the case.
Well, I think there are multiple reports. I think we're looking at 2 different things as well. There are multiple reports of the IDF withholding aid from the population in Gaza. And I think when we're talking about organisations that the UN backs, like the courts of justice, declaring a genocide.
They haven't declared a genocide. They haven't declared a genocide. What the International Court of Justice, you need to check this, the International Court of Justice, it has been suggested by South Africa and other countries that there is a genocide to look into, but it has not been declared by the ICJ. It has not been declared by the United Nations. Okay. No one has said this because it doesn't exist. It's not the case.
At what point, if you have
if you have someone like Francesca Albanese, for example, who is a UN rapporteur on Palestine. That's fine. She says it's happening. That's okay. That's not the UN. That's someone who is a rapporteur whose job it is to look into that, and I would argue she's a deeply anti-Semitic person.
I would argue that someone like Francesca Albanese is far more qualified than you and I sat here to be declaring whether something's a genocide or not.
Well,
and also
Francesca Albanese, who I've
leading
interviewed
genocide scholars as well, Peter, across the board, have been talking about...
Genocide is a really straightforward thing. If you're killing 22,000 innocent civilians out of a population of 2 million, that is not genocide. And also, why are these people worried about genocide when you haven't said a word of criticism of Hamas, you haven't said anything about the 7th of October and the start of it, the start of all of this. You also haven't talked about Darfur, Nigeria. There are actual genocides happening in this country that loads of people on the left don't seem to actually care about. They don't seem to actually have any marches about or demonstrations about or care about. And you've got to ask the question, why is that?
For things like Sudan, for all of these other genocides that are going on in the world, I've worked at a couple of these protests that have gone on for Palestine, and there have been blocks within these protests for Sudan, for Darfur, for wherever it might be, where there are injustices going across the world. There is, on the left, a lot of international solidarity and a lot of transactions
not
between
nearly
these
on the scale, not nearly on the scale of the group of people on the left who believe that Israel's always wrong.
But I think there's a philosophy within that that says the reason why people are so up in arms over these things around the Israeli attacks on Gaza is that it's to do with the UK's involvement in supplying weapons. It's to do with the UK's involvement with America, who's actively backing the government of Israel that in recent times has done things such as make the death penalty legal for Palestinians.
So what would you do if you were running Israel and the 7th of October happened and thousands of people were murdered, burned, raped, taken hostage? What would your solution to that be? How would you react to that?
I don't think that the answer to that is to kill 20,000 children, Peter.
It was not 20,000 children, it was 20,000 men, women and children. So the statistics
you just said 70,000 a second ago.
Yeah, 70,000 people in total. 72,000 is the full death toll, and agreed by the UN, Hamas, and the Israelis. And you've got 50,000 pensions given to Hamas soldiers. So there's 20,000 extra people. I'm not saying I want any of those people to die. I don't want anyone, innocent civilians, to die. I care about the people of Palestine, of the Palestinian territories. I want there to be a two-state solution. I want them to be free of Hamas. But what I just often don't see from the left is a criticism of why this started, how it helped, or how it started, how it was actually perpetrated, and then all the blame seems to go on Israel when actually the huge amount of blame has to go to Hamas. And, you know, we've been talking for 4 or 5 minutes on this, and you haven't mentioned them once, Sean.
Mentioned whether
Hamas.
I can...
Yeah.
But
I'm not asking you.
We were talking about whether there is a genocide or not.
Yeah.
I feel like we've gotten into that.
Do you believe Hamas's actions on the 7th of October were genocidal, for example?
Were they genocidal?
Yeah.
In a one-day event?
Yes.
I think it's a tragedy, a horrific tragedy, but whether there is a case for genocide in that...
I'm not saying it's genocide, I'm saying were they genocidal. It's different.
So what is the difference that you're trying to clarify?
So genocidal is attempting to destroy an entire civilization or entire people, or people simply because they are, for example, Israeli.
I think it was a terrorist attack. I think it was a horrific terrorist attack. I think whether you're talking about a case of targeting Israelis particularly and targeting Israeli civilians particularly, it is horrific, and in that description you've gave, it would be a genocidal act where you're targeting exclusively Israeli people. However, we're talking about something else. Well, I don't frankly know what we're talking about.
We're talking about what happened in Gaza, and we're dealing with the fact that the death toll does not denote genocide. It doesn't denote genocide.
Because there are not enough people that have been killed that isn't a genocide.
So what Israel could do very, very easily, if it wanted to, we're getting totally off topic, I do want to get back to the IRGC, but what Israel could have done in half an hour is wipe out everybody in Gaza. They could do that. They could have dropped a bomb. They could have targeted every single person in Gaza if they wanted to. Instead, what we have seen are to have been things have gone wrong. Of course they have. Civilians have died. I don't want any civilians to die. But what we have seen is a restrained action by Israel that is not recognised by many people who have your political position.
Is a double-tap attack on a hospital a restrained action?
There have been many different attacks that haven't gone as they should have.
Well, this is what I'm saying. It's not across the board that this has been a moral response to something that happened. You know, as I was saying earlier on, I've spoken to people in UNICEF that have been on the ground in Gaza, that have seen firsthand aid on the other side of the border being held by the IDF for months on end, up until the point that there was a famine in Gaza.
There wasn't a famine in Gaza.
No. Sorry, I beg your pardon.
The
risk of famine.
There wasn't a famine. There were so many people. Again,
there was the risk of famine widely reported by UNICEF.
There was never any risk of famine. There was never any risk of famine. Where are the people who were starving? Where are the photographs of the people who were starving?
Peter, come on. There have been photos widely reported.
No, there have been photos of people with congenital diseases and then the wider photo comes out. The New York Times retracted the photo they used because the mother, the father were fine and the baby was dying of congenital disease. Not a single person was starving in Gaza through lack of food. You look at, there are so many phones people have, iPhones, they have smartphones in Gaza. Where were the people dying of famine?
I've already said that there was a risk of famine in Gaza, and there have been cases of, again, from what I've been told by members of UNICEF, from what they have seen on the ground in Gaza, the risk of famine that was being reported by organisations like UNICEF is a credible one.
What are your thoughts on the huge-scale slaughter of Christians in Nigeria?
What are my thoughts on it?
Yeah.
It's horrific.
Okay. Why do you think that people on the left, and I'm not holding you responsible for every single person on the left, why do you think that the left has not had anything nearly as big a response to that as what has happened in Israel? Why do you think that is? Could it be because they just don't like Israel?
I would wonder what the motivations of people... I mean, you're talking about how the media reports things.
I'm talking about people perhaps demonstrating.
I'm moving back slightly from it, because we're talking about something that happened in October 2023 that there were widespread reports on at the time, that there were horrific videos coming out of, and then in the days, weeks and months following, there was a response from, as you said, the left, but also people in the Conservative Party, people like Mark Francois, people like Edward Lee. Only last week, the father of the house was speaking about the horrific conditions that people in Gaza and the West Bank are living under. This is not something that happened, it started in October 2023. There have been marches in this country and other countries across Europe for decades about the treatment of Israel towards the Palestinians, whether it's about plantations in the West Bank, whether it's about calorie quotas in Gaza, whether it's 2019 attacks on Gaza, whether it's differing number plates for Palestinians living in the West Bank that work in Israel, whether it's the widely reported and widely accepted Amnesty International and other international bodies considering an apartheid state operating in Israel as well. This has been happening for decades. And so I think in the United Kingdom, when you're looking at whether there's coverage or whether there's outcry over other things that are happening in the world, frankly, I think there are two reasons. One, they haven't been happening for nearly as long, and two, the media interest is elsewhere.
Surely some of that media interest is derived from the interest that activists have, and I'm not saying the media shouldn't cover it for a second, but do you accept that an anti-Israel feeling might be just part of it? I wouldn't say that this is a by and large opinion of people on the left. I think you've had... I just think there's a lot of evidence that would suggest that many people on the left just feel that Israel's always wrong. In terms of the treatment of Palestinians? Well, no, that their actions in general are wrong. What other actions are people on the left opposing Israel for? Well, I think there are a lot of people on the left who don't believe Israel should exist, for example, who come out on these marches, for example, and say, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. That is talking about the Israeli state being erased. You do know that that
chant is talking about the West Bank and Gaza, though. The West Bank sits on the Jordan River and Gaza
I'm aware
sits
of
on
that, but what about
so it's
Israeli...
referring to two Palestinian territories.
I don't think it is.
And look, with every chant and with every song, people take different views and people get different meanings from what the songs are. My understanding of that one is that it's in reference to the West Bank and in reference to Gaza.
Okay, well,
now,
I think that's a selective understanding. But Sean, thank you for your thoughts on that. Sorry, Joe, we will come to you in a second. We'll take a break now.
Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to win a massive £26,000. The question is, what would you do with all that money?
I don't know. We've got a wedding.
I would buy a camper van.
Probably just like clothes, yeah.
Go on a big holiday. Emigrate.
So if you fancy getting your hands on £26,000 tax-free, here's all the details you need to enter.
For your chance to win, visit talk.tv/win or text TALK to 8338 by 6 p.m. on the 20th of July 2026. Texts cost £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or send your name and number by post to Comp 1, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP. To arrive by midnight on the 23rd of July 2026. 18 plus, UK residents only. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 8338 now. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talk.tv/win.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, that conversation with Sean went off in a slightly different direction than I thought it would, but I appreciate you engaging. Mary in County Down says there's absolutely no doubt that many people struggled and still struggle to get enough food, clean water and essential medicine in Gaza. People connected to Hamas, of course, got enough to eat, but many innocent civilians have suffered. Blanket claims and denials of food insecurity aren't helpful. Nick says, per Joe Wheeler sitting there in a room for the last 15 minutes. Joe, she doesn't care, she's just counting the money. Joe, tell us your thoughts on the IRGC and its prescription.
Well, I will do, and I have to say that actually I thought your conversation was absolutely fascinating. And I think, you know, when it comes to that particular subject, I don't think anybody is particularly well informed. So to hear both sides of it, you know, as you described, argued, it was great. As far as the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, the fact that they've been designated a threat to national security, my question would be, why not before now?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Two other groups have been prescribed, the Islamic Movement of Companions of the Right, IMCR, and the Volunteer Corps of Russia's GRU, Foreign Military and Intelligence Agency. But why aren't we looking at any of these groups at any given time? And this kind of goes back to what you were discussing. Any group that has either caused violence, created violence, you know, committed atrocities, yes, why are they not just proscribed first and foremost? Get rid of them. We know that we've had discussions about protests before now, yes, and there are some that are more likely to cause trouble than others. name no names, but if they're likely to cause trouble, then why not just stop it?
Well, there's a big question, I think, on the Muslim Brotherhood as well. We'll perhaps return to that on another occasion, maybe even with the reviewer of terrorism legislation, Jonathan Hall, a little bit later on. Just to say that Andy Burnham has now received the backing of 349 Labour MPs. That's 349 out of 403. I mean, we're into sort of North Korea levels here. It makes it mathematically impossible for any other candidate to challenge him for the party leadership. So on Friday, he will be declared the leader of the Labour Party, and on Monday, he will be the next Prime Minister. I just want to talk about something that might be in his in tray, actually, which is that Argentina has said that British Falkland Islanders are artificial and that they have been very, very derogatory in regard to that. We'll speak to a veteran of that conflict a little bit later on in the programme, and there is, of course, that big football match on Wednesday night. Joe, your thoughts on this?
About the football?
No, not about the football, no, on the Argentinians.
Well, obviously, you know, some of us remember the Falklands War and you know, the feeling of victory when we won it. It's been an ongoing rattle with the Spain and then Argentina. And we fought hard for it. We should keep it. And, you know, there should be no discussion
about it. Especially when you have 99% of people on the Falkland Islands who want to remain British. So their self-determination is clearly a part of this, Sean.
Yeah, well, 99.8 to be precise.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're going to argue again.
I mean, we're talking...
Speaking North Korea levels.
Yeah, exactly. We're talking about Burnham's North Korea levels. I mean, it's an interesting one. It's a funny one as an Irishman to always look at the Falklands and Britain and how there's this kind of constant from, I think Millet, when he was first elected the president, his first speech included how they were going to take back the Malvinas and they were going to do it quickly and swiftly, but yet they're still chirping from the sidelines on it.
We have the thoughts of Gary Lineker on this as well. Can we play that clip about what he said about this?
England could face Argentina in a semi-final. We're getting ahead of ourselves a fraction, but so much history between our nations, isn't there? I mean, obviously, it was not that long ago two countries were at war, Falklands or Malvinas.
Why he just needlessly says these things. Well, listen, thank you very much to the underemployed Joe Wheeler, broadcaster and media. Joe, how long is this heat wave going to go on?
Have we got enough time to discuss
briefly?
It's going to stay warm until the end of the week. Yes.
Okay.
The gazing into the weather crystal ball, yeah, the end of July is looking like a bit of a washout, a delight for gardeners and farmers alike. We'll see some real rain. Until then, we're just going to see this low cloud coming in overnight over eastern counties, burning back during the day. Temperatures stay high, particularly in the west southwest. Then there'll be some thunderstorms.
Marvellous. She is the Swiss Army knife of guests. So there we are. Sean, thank you very much indeed as well. Enjoyed our discussion. Head of content at Politics Joe. That was quite the debate desk. Whatever you think, please let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. We're going to speak to Harvey Proctor in a second. He's a former Conservative MP, but the reason we're talking about him is because Ann Widdecombe stood by him even when he was accused of dreadful things which he was not guilty of at all. He was horribly accused of completely incorrect things. We'll talk about her death, what it means to him and what the police should do. So much to discuss. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good evening, it's just gone 8 o'clock. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company here on the Evening Exchange. Lots of reaction to my discussion with Sean there. We'll bring that to you in a minute or two. Andy Burnham now receiving the backing of 349 Labour MPs. It is now mathematically impossible for any other candidate to challenge him for the party leadership. He will be leader of the Labour Party on Friday. He will be Prime Minister next Monday, barring catastrophe. Lots to discuss as well on Ann Widdecombe. We know that counter-terrorism police have taken over the investigation. That has been confirmed by the Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood. We'll speak to someone I've wanted to speak to for a couple of days, actually, Harvey Proctor. He's a former Conservative MP, and Ann Widdecombe stood by him when he was accused of terrible things, of which he was entirely innocent when it came to paedophilia. I mean, that just wasn't the case, that he just hadn't done anything. He was dealt with dreadfully. He lost his home, he lost his income, he lost many, many things, and Ann Widdecombe stood by him. And some of the stories that are coming out about that, about her compassion. I read one earlier today about a journalist knocking her doorstepping her, as we say. She invited him in and made him a whiskey. Those sorts of things. Loads to discuss on all of that. We're also discussing a little bit later the prescription of the IRGC. We've got the Jonathan Hall, who's the counter-terror legislation reviewer. He'll be with us. We'll also talk about Argentina, and the British Falkland Islanders are artificial, according to the Argentinians. We'll talk about that. Lots to discuss. 0344 499 1000. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a WhatsApp text message. You can send me a WhatsApp voice note, or you can give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss. Let's do it here on the Evening Exchange. Thank you to everybody who've been in touch about my discussion with Sean there, which was really off topic, but honestly, it was nonetheless an interesting one to talk to Sean about it. Some people accusing him of bordering on anti-Semitism. I don't think he was, actually. I think Sean entered the discussion. I disagree with him fundamentally, but I do not think that he was anti-Semitic in any way in what he said. In fact, he possessed, I think, a lot more facts than most people. But Elisa in Chelmsford says, I just stood up and applauded for you correctly challenging Sean. You possess facts. He possesses an attitude mixed up with typical blood libels and propaganda against Israel, and people wonder why anti-Semitism is rife in the UK. With people like Sean spreading this disgusting propaganda, it's not at all surprising. Critical one from Bob in Belfast, Benny in Belfast, who says reducing the discussion about Gaza to numbers is inhumane and actually irrelevant. People died who shouldn't, people who suffered who shouldn't. We need far more focus on what is practically and effectively being done to improve conditions for people trapped in the hell of Gaza. I totally agree with that. I suppose the point, particularly on the numbers, is to disprove the genocide lie. Adam says, good evening, Peter. May I suggest your guest actually do some research into videos coming out of Gaza? There are many, many social accounts showing that life isn't the best due to housing issues, but there are a very large number of restaurants, coffee shops, even phone shops that are open and doing extremely good business. I've even seen videos of brand new BMWs and Mercedes in Gaza for weddings. His claims of genocide are blind, as you say, to the real genocides taking place across the world. Brian says, your guest is trying to defend the indefensible. Graham says, what are your guest's thoughts on the thousands of missiles launched by Hamas and Hezbollah into Israel? Becca says, per Joe Wheeler, sitting there like a third wheel next to someone who supports UNICEF, UN and the genocide narrative. Paul says, I'm afraid your left-wing commentator will never accept the horrible reality of war, which was forced on Israel, and the declared intent of Hamas to have as many dead civilians as possible. How many civilians were directed to tunnels to shelter? Absolutely none, says Paul in Horsham. I think Paul has a reasonable point there. I mean, Sean was perfectly polite. He was engaging with me, and I don't think, there's some people saying he was anti-Semitic. I don't think he is at all. But certainly there are a number of things that I think he needs to look into. Maybe I do too. Whatever you think of that discussion and everything else we're discussing this evening, please do give me a shout. 0344 499 1000. I want to talk about MP safety, specifically Nigel Farage and other members of Reform UK. This comes in the wake of Ann Widdecombe's murder. We'll be speaking to a former friend of hers in a second, but let's see what the Home Secretary has been saying to Parliament today on the safety of MPs.
I recognise the particular concern that the Reform Party will feel today, and of course Nigel Farage, the party's leader. I'm happy to offer a meeting for Mr Farage with the chair of RAVIC, the independent body within the Home Office that manages the security of those in public life. And I will also be looking at what security guidance can be provided to former members of Parliament, which I hope to work with you on, Mr Speaker, as well as those who serve a party outside of this place.
Richard Tice, the Deputy Leader of Reform UK, paid tribute to Ann Widdecombe, as many others did in Parliament today. This is what he said.
We're all reeling with shock, sadness and anguish at the loss of our Ann, and also the manner in which she has been taken from us. She was a colossus in public life, in political life, a legend adored and loved by millions and millions of people, including my own late mother, for whom she spoke so very warmly of Anne. She was a remarkable lady. She had an incredible work ethic. She would think nothing of going the length and breadth of the country to speak at rallies. She was an incredible orator who always spoke without notes. Absolutely remarkable. And, Mr Speaker, and I just asked the Home Secretary in conclusion, could she ensure that the counter-terrorism unit keep us updated on as regular possible basis? And given the nature of these things, we all want our police forces to do brilliantly, of course. Would it be wise, when considering motivation, when giving us early updates, to keep things being open-ended as opposed to motive, as opposed to ruling things out too quickly that may then end up being ruled back in?
The Home Secretary responded to that, of course. It's interesting what the police in Devon and Cornwall have said as well. This is the Assistant Chief Constable Matt Longman giving an update, because previously we were told there wasn't a counter-terror aspect to this. We were told there wasn't a political element to this. Instead, we're now told there is a terror element to it, and the suspect has been rearrested on suspicion of terror offences. This was the update given by the Assistant Chief Constable Matt Longman.
We retain primacy of this investigation, and detectives remain open-minded about the potential motive. At this stage, there is nothing to suggest that it was politically motivated.
So I wonder what Harvey Proctor thinks. He's a former Conservative MP. Harvey, I want to get your thoughts on what Ann Widdecombe said and her attitude to you, certainly when you were going through a very tough time in your life, in just a moment. But perhaps you could give me your reaction to the fact that this has now been upgraded to a terrorism investigation.
Good evening to you.
Good evening.
To your viewers and listeners. First of all, I would obviously like to send my deepest condolences to Ann Widdecombe's family, and to say that to her friends and supporters who will be listening to your programme tonight, that I share their grief. With regard to the police news, I have no wish to be critical of the police in these matters. These are difficult issues, and I'm sure they are doing their best in very trying and difficult circumstances. What I would say is that with regard to speculation on motive and other things, none of us should speculate on these matters, and that includes the police.
Yes, it's interesting that the Independent Reviewer of Terrorism legislation has said that too. Perhaps you could tell me your story. I know you've written about this over the weekend, you've broadcast about it, in regard to how Ann Widdecombe treated you, especially when you were going through the most difficult time of your life, because so many people abandoned you, did they not? So many people simply believed what you were accused of when actually it wasn't true at all.
Of course, I support all the things that have been said in Parliament and in the media about Ann Widdecombe in terms of her stature as a parliamentarian and as a much-loved lady. However, in my case, I have a personal issue where I received great support from Ann, and that was in 2015, which you've inferred, Operation Midland, when the Metropolitan Police supported a star witness of theirs, that said there'd been a paedophile ring, which is completely untrue, and where I was accused publicly by the police of murdering 3 children. This was very debilitating to me emotionally, but practically in terms of losing my job. My house went with the job, and may I say it, I received death threats, which meant that I had to leave the country. I couldn't stay in the country at that time. There were very few, there were some, but there were very few people who at that time stood by me. And Anne was one, and she gave both emotional, public, and private support, for which I will be eternally grateful.
And what did that mean for you when there were so few people who had done that?
Well, you get to feel that everybody is against you and that everybody will take the line of the police, not always right, and certainly not in this case, when they said that their star witness was credible and true.
Yes.
When he wasn't credible, he wasn't true.
Yes.
And subsequently was prosecuted for perverting the course of justice and sentenced to 18 years in prison. He came out a few months ago, having served only 7 years and a few months because of the early release policies of the present government.
How will you remember Ann Widdecombe?
Well, I will remember her personally as a very good supporter of mine in my darkest hour, in the deepest of difficulties. That's when people who support, you know, they are your friends. And that is how I will always remember her, as a friend in times of deep trouble for me.
Thank you very much. That's Harvey Proctor, the former Conservative MP. Really good to speak to you this evening. Thank you to Debbie, who's been in touch and says, I think law and order needs to be clamped down on, not added security. How much is this costing? We're already paying for 10 ex-MPs at my count. Not just quite as many as that, I think it's 7 or 8, but still a lot, Debbie. The savagery isn't the British way. Cliff in Berkshire says, Argentina want the Falkland Islands because there's a smell of oil riches. I'm convinced that the left are kidnapped and taken to a training facility where they are brainwashed with the same beliefs and phrases. Leftism is a cancer destroying the West and needs to be cut off and removed, says Cliff. Another person has said, Joanna in Salisbury says, Cardi P, Nigel Farage refusing to taxpayer security. The last time they withdrew 75% of his security with only 2 weeks' notice. That would mean having to change all his other plans, interviews, possible candidates, and that might take a lot longer to organise. At least with his own, he hasn't got to worry about the sudden withdrawal again. Surely he should have an allowance towards it. Mick says, well done, Peter, for holding this apologist for Islamism to the fire. I don't think actually Sean was apologising for Islamism, so I think I disagree with you on that, Mick, but I appreciate your support. The one thing he said that really got my heckles up when he said that the genocide in Nigeria hasn't been going on long, well, it's Islamic persecution of Christians and Jews that has been continuous for about 1400 years, but as it's Islam, nobody wants to talk about it. And as for Sudan and Syria, again, it's being done by Islamists, so we can't talk about it. Another person says, thank you for at least daring to seriously question that obviously young, uneducated man who has been indoctrinated by a privileged education. That is Lindy saying that. Another person says, if Israel wanted to, they could have flattened Gaza in ours. It's not a genocide, it was war, and legitimately they could have destroyed Gaza the same way we destroyed Germany. Thank you, Joanna. That was largely my point on the numbers, certainly, and I know it is a bit crass to talk about people, you know, only 20,000 people dying. It is a horrendous number, and even one innocent civilian dying is an awful thing. The point, I suppose, I was making was that genocide, it would be very difficult to be a genocide for such such a small number of people when a genocide could have occurred if Israel wanted it to, but it didn't. Graham says it's no wonder that Devon and Cornwall police have been stripped of their investigation into Ann Widdecombe's death when they were the police force that failed to deal with Bob Villan's chant at Glastonbury. I don't think it was, actually. I think it was Avon and Somerset. It was Avon and Somerset, Graham, because Glastonbury was dealt with by a different police force, but thank you for that. It's interesting that they're saying, of course, that Devon and Cornwall police are saying they're still in charge. I mean, certainly the counter-terror police will be working hard to try to work out exactly what's going on there. Another person, Mike in Lincoln, says, good evening, Peter. Good evening, Mike. In the news melee that followed the tragic death of Ann Widdecombe, I missed the Prime Minister heir apparent Andy Burnham's comments about Israel and the British response following the 7th of October massacres. Having caught up with it today, I sat agog at his words. It left me wondering if he made the comment in a vain attempt to get back those hard-left anti-Semites who've crossed the Greens, if he'll be inviting Jeremy Corbyn back into Labour and making him Foreign Secretary. My perception from his speech is that he came across as a racist, which I know he would deny, anti-Semite, and demonstrated a complete lack of understanding of foreign affairs on top of his lack of understanding of economics. I think we're in for a very rough, hard left time of it. I'm feeling very sad, says Mike in Lincoln. Lots more to discuss, and we will take your calls in just a minute too. If you want to get your voice on the air, please do give me a ring. 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
The Telegraph is reporting that wealthy people are planning to emigrate if Ed Miliband becomes Chancellor. We should know around this time next week who the next Chancellor of the Exchequer is, and Ed Miliband is one of the main candidates that Andy Burnham is looking at. Ultra-high net worth individuals are looking for ways to avoid possible equalisation of capital gains tax with income tax. Wealthy Britain's preparing to leave, the Telegraph says, if Ed Miliband becomes Chancellor and launches a new tax rate on the rich. Ultra-high net worth individuals based in the UK have contacted international tax advisors looking for a way to avoid the possible equalisation of capital gains tax with income tax in the first months of Andy Burnham's government. We're certainly promised anyway quite a big budget that whoever the Chancellor is would deliver, and there are many in the City of London and others who would not be happy with Ed Miliband as Chancellor. I must say I am one of them. Stuart says disagreeing with a culture's motives or behaviour does not make someone anti-Semitic. Anti-Semitism is an innate hatred of an entire culture or civilization without good cause, facts or good reasons. Nobody has been anti-Semitic on your programme. What complete tosh? Are people thick or what? Says Stuart. I was defending Sean, of course, and I don't think he was anti-Semitic. Also, Stuart says genocide, Peter, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, is exterminating large numbers of people. No specific figures are mentioned. Well, Stuart, there is a legal definition in international law of what genocide is, and it is more specific than the one you offer, but thank you for that nonetheless. Lorraine says, I've spent the last few months in total despair. It was apparent to any decent, fair-minded person that something horrendous was about to happen, considering the egregious behaviour of the media, journalists and politicians toward Farage and reform. Whilst politics and politicians need scrutiny, it was obvious that is a targeted, concerted attack on Farage and reform. A clear example is the total lack of serious scrutiny of Burnham, and most recently the Standards Committee investigation of the Conservative Kevin Hollingrake that has been ignored by journalists. Sadly, a frail elderly lady, a national treasure, has lost her life. Whilst we cannot speculate, I do hope those who've enjoyed the Get Farage game feel ashamed, because what I've witnessed has not been responsible. It has been dangerous. It has been sinister. It is not British, says Lorraine. And another person says, I can understand Nigel Farage refusing taxpayer security. Last time they withdrew 75% of it. Let's go to the phones. Nigel is in London and has some thoughts on policing. Nigel, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Well, thank you. Good evening, Peter.
Good evening.
I echo the thoughts that Sean, I do not think in any way was anti-Semitic. It was just an interesting spirited debate, so no anti-Semitism there whatsoever.
I agree.
I want to say, if I can, which I think is very important, I don't see how the public and indeed the media can have much confidence and trust in policing. I think we have to remember the statement made by the Deputy Chief Constable last week. He says, while, and I'm quoting here, we consulted counter-terrorism policing as part of our initial inquiries, the incident is not being treated as terrorism. Well, that's obviously a bit presumptuous on his part, and I don't think that statement should have been made. I think he should have said, our investigation is ongoing and robust, and we haven't made a decision as to what...
Well, that's a really good point, Nigel. And actually, Jonathan Hall, KC, who's the independent reviewer of terrorism legislation, we're talking to him a little bit later on in the programme. Yeah. But actually, earlier today, he was talking about Devon and Cornwall Police in another interview, and he said, I don't know why they didn't simply say they had an open mind as to the motivation. Yeah. I think they probably broke one of the golden rules of investigations, which is not to comment on live investigations in case new facts emerge. Now, there was obviously a huge desire from many people to know what was going on, but if you're saying it's not, but they're still saying it's not politically motivated, I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised if that changes too, Nigel.
No, I think you're right. We also have to look about in another area of this, is that the Sun newspaper had an exclusive CCTV grab of the suspect holding what is believed to be some form of pole or weapon.
Yes.
Now, when I worked at the Evening Standard newspaper for 26 years, I covered virtually every crime scene, murder crime scene in London, and the amount of information we sought from people who offered us CCTV grabs and information, and indeed trolls. We looked through social media to get information, and people phoned us up and gave us information, which of course the police were never sought before we got it. So they're sometimes, and in many cases, behind the curve. So I think it's interesting that if the police want the public to have confidence in their service, they should be, I think, more open and I think more transparent in the way that they give information out and they speak to the public, because I think at the moment that is not the case, and it's disappointing.
Yeah, I think all of that makes perfect sense. Thank you very much, Nigel. Appreciate your call. Let's go to Lenny in Ashford. Lenny, what's on your mind this evening?
Well, I've got 2 points, Peter, I would like to make. The first regarding Starmer. with the compensation the government are going to have to face with Ollie, where it
Ollie Robbins, this this person who was head of the Foreign Office, yeah.
Yeah. Now, the whole situation was Starmer's fault. It was two blokes having a dispute at work, and Starmer took all the action and sacked him on the spot and things like that.
Yeah.
And the man was innocent. And I truly believe that Starmer should be held responsible and be accountable for any money the government have to pay out.
I don't think that's going to happen, though, Lenny, do you?
No, but it shows you the true mentality of Starmer, where he's so full of himself with his integrity and everything and transparency. Now he truly is should be responsible, stand up and be counted and pay the money. We'll see if he does it or not.
Well, thank you for your thoughts, Lenny. We're talking about that a little bit later on the programme as well. So that's Lenny and Ashford there. Let's go to Terence in Manchester. He has some thoughts on Andy Burnham, a person you're pretty familiar with in your part of the world, Terence.
He is indeed, yes. My question is, Peter, if you could lighten us a little bit. When Andy Burnham becomes Prime Minister, from day one, he will get the keys and the codes to our nuclear deterrent.
Yeah, that's the first thing he has to do. He has to write those letters, doesn't he, to the captains of the Trident submarines?
That's correct, yeah. So has he appointed a defence minister?
Well, he won't do that until he's Prime Minister next Monday, will he?
Yeah, but all we can hear at the moment is he's probably got somebody lined up for the Chancellor.
Yeah, he's probably got a defence person lined up as well. We just don't know who that is just yet. And he's not going to tell us just at this moment, is he?
Well, he should align us a little bit what his plans are, because I think when he was a Corbynite, I think he was against nuclear power.
Yeah, it's very interesting that he has shifted his opinion on numerous occasions. Terence, you're from the kind of mayor he's been in Manchester, do you think he'll be a good Prime Minister?
No.
Why not?
Right, he's... all he goes on about is free buses. They're not free. It's all paid by the taxpayer.
Yes.
And then he was pushing for HS2. He wanted it completed. He wanted it so they could get quicker to London. Now he's going to bring Parliament to Manchester. Mm-hmm. So his views are erratic. He changes with the wind.
I think a lot of people feel that way about Andy Burnham. It'll be very interesting to see what he does as Prime Minister. Thank you, Terence in Manchester. Elisa has made an interesting point. She said, didn't the police say at this stage there's nothing to suggest terrorism? Evidence doesn't always present itself straight away. Yeah, I think that probably was the case, but it's interesting from Jonathan Hall's perspective. He says that you shouldn't give this running commentary and say nothing has come at this stage. I mean, they're still saying today, for example, that there's no political element to this. I would be very surprised if that is the case, but nonetheless, we'll find out where the investigation goes and everything that comes out in court. Darrell in Lincoln's been in touch and says, why do these people just accuse Israel of genocide without even considering the fact that Iran are financing these terrorist organisations and set Hamas to launch their own provoked attack to prevent a peace process in the Middle East? Iran and the terror groups are solely to blame. Israel had no choice. He never answered your question of what else would he have done. And it's interesting you mentioned that, Darrell. I've never had that actually, as those who are against Israel, I've never had that question convincingly answered to me anyway. I have a number of friends and people I respect who are very anti-Israel's actions in Gaza, and I always say, what would you have done in reaction to the 7th of October? And it's usually a response like Sean's, but listen, there we are. Lots more to discuss. We'll talk a little bit about Israel actually in a minute. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps have been banned by the UK at long last. We'll speak to Vahid Bashetti, who is an anti-IRGC campaigner. He staged a 72-day hunger strike opposite the Foreign Office in London on this matter. We'll see what he has to say in just a minute. I'd like to hear from you as well. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to win a massive £26,000. The question is, what would you do with all that money?
I don't know. We've got a wedding.
I would buy a camper van.
Probably just like clothes, yeah.
Got on a big holiday. Emigrate.
So if you fancy getting your hands on £26,000 tax-free, here's all the details you need to enter.
For your chance to win, visit talk.tv/win or text talk to 8338 by 6 p.m. on the 20th of July 2026. Texts cost £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or send your name and number by post to Comp 1 PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by midnight on the 23rd of July 2026. 18 plus, UK residents only. So for your chance to win, text talk to 8338 now. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talk.tv/win.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Right then, let's talk about the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Shabana Mahmood has announced that the IRGC will be designated a threat to national security. I say that's about time. I remember that journalist who that court case actually has just finished about the people who stabbed him, tried to murder him, who were acting on behalf of Iran. In a written statement to Parliament, she set out how support for the IRGC, from expressing a positive opinion to assisting them, will now be an offence punishable by up to 14 years in prison. Two other groups have also been prescribed: the Islamic Movement of Companions of the Right and the Volunteer Corps of the GRU, the Foreign Military Intelligence Agency of Russia. New powers will be given to police and intelligence agencies to tackle espionage, foreign interference, sabotage and physical attacks from these groups. We know about 7 attacks that we know of anyway. I'm sure there are many others that have been prevented, linked to Jewish and Israeli communities, including the anti-Semitic arson attack on 4 Hatzalah ambulances in Golders Green on the 23rd of March, which the IMCR have publicly claimed responsibility for. I want to speak now to Vahid Beheshti, who is an anti-IRGC campaigner. He staged a 72-day hunger strike opposite the Foreign Office in London. Vahid, thank you for joining me. Tell me what your feeling is today, now the British government, the UK government, have done what you and many other campaigners have been asking them to do for some time.
Thank you for having me in your show. And it was started with 72 days hunger strike, and we continue with the campaign with sit-in protest. Today is the day 1,236 days, and the campaign will continue. First of all, let me congratulate these to my dear British citizen, my dear Iranian people, and all freedom fighter. Of course, this is not full prescription. Let's remember this. This is not full prescription. The greatest step is designating IRGC and the other 2 groups which are connected with IRGC, but it's not full prescription. However, we embrace this, regardless of the matter of the security and legal and security aspect of this, I think, great decision of our government. It has a very, I think, very clear and precise and important political message. It carries a very important, significant political message, which is, at least, finally, our government UK government has concluded that the Iranian regime, this evil regime, neither reformable or nor reliable partner. For that reason, I think our government made that decision and took this step, because they know, they are aware Iranian regime might, in reaction to this, shut down their embassy. So what? So be it. They shut down their embassy. What we are doing with our embassy in past 47 years in Iran, that was the argument of David Cameron with me.
Yes.
So he says, if we do this, they are going to shut down our embassy. I said, what is your achievement so far in past 48 years with this brutal, evil regime?
Yes.
We couldn't even stop one of their attack in our soil here in the UK and around the world. So this is a great, I think this is a great decision. At least they understand, listen, this is very important, because this regime, if they see decisive, strong reaction from any country, they back down. But whatever they do, what they observe, what they experience in past, especially 5-6 years from our government, I mean UK government, it was no leadership, it was no strength, it was nothing. But at least they get something, they feel something, and I am really happy for this reason.
Tell me about why you believe the IRGC should be prescribed fully, because there are lots of people in this country who perhaps don't know so much about it necessarily. They're familiar with the Iran war, but why the IRGC specifically? We've heard about the 7 attacks on our own soil. What do Iranians deal with on a daily basis from the IRGC?
IRGC means Iranian regime. IRGC is the heart of Iranian regime. Basically, this is a mafia military group which has been created 48 years ago, in order to protect the regime, the Iranian regime. And in their mandate, if you go and read, it says their goal, their mission after protecting the regime is that exporting the ideology of the Iranian regime. What is this ideology? That ideology is this: destroying the order of our modern democratic world in order to establish the Islamic Caliphate. This is the mission of IRGC. And in order to reach to this mission, to establish the Islamic state, the Islamic Caliphate in entire globe, they done everything. So they brainwashing our youth, they radicalize our youth in UK, in all European country. They supporting, creating all these terrorist groups, Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis, Hashd al-Shabi, and other more than 10 terrorist groups in the region. And they create all this chaos around the world in order to reach to their mission. So for that reason, this is the biggest terrorist organization in the world. It should be, this action of our government should be taken 5 years ago, 6 years ago. We're too late, but still good decision, we embrace it.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. That is Vahid Beheshti, who is an anti-IRGC campaigner. He himself staged a 72-day hunger strike opposite the Foreign Office in London. Appreciate his contribution. Sharon has been in touch and says, I'm still in disbelief that someone has driven that far with the intent to cause harm to another person. Of course, that's alleged. We don't know whether that person is the person who murdered Ann Widdecombe, but he is certainly the suspect and has been arrested. I'm devastated, says Sharon, about Ann. She was a character and just said it how it was, RIP. And also now the IRGC have been prescribed. Will the Iranian embassy now close? And what about all the supporters who live here? It is frightening. Stuart's been in touch and says genocide is more specifically defined under international domestic law, but even this does not refer specifically to numbers or victims or anything. So neither you nor Sean are technically correct. I would argue against that. Stuart, I would say that it's about an entire culture, an entire people, and easily Israel could have committed genocide in Gaza. They haven't, and there's no evidence that what has happened in Gaza is a genocide, even though it is obviously dreadful, it is awful for people who live there, and I want there to be peace in the Middle East. I want there to be a two-state solution. I want to free Palestine from Hamas. Thank you, Stuart, for that. Lots to discuss. We're going to talk about the Falkland Islands in just a second. A veteran of that war in 1982 is going to join us. We're also going to talk about what Gary Lineker has said. He's referred to them as La Small Vinus, which he knows is just a gratuitously offensive thing for so many people, including people who lost their lives or injured, maimed in that war. Yet there he is, woke yet again, doing everything he can to annoy people. We will also talk about what the Argentinians have said, particularly in light of the fact that they're playing England in the World Cup on Wednesday night, and the fact that more offensive comments have been made which are just not supported by people in the Falklands themselves. Whatever you think about anything we have been talking about this evening, I'd love to hear from you. 0344 499 1000. There's plenty to discuss this evening, including what Ernie says, which is how come the police say to us don't speculate or post anything online while a murder investigation is ongoing, as it might prejudice the outcome of a court case. Yet I got up this morning, put the TV on, there's a video of the alleged murderer with the alleged murder weapon in his pocket. How did the police allow that to happen, and why? Well, Ernie, I would imagine that the Sun's exclusive, which is a great exclusive, would be something the police would rather hadn't happened. But of course, it's good journalism, and I think the Sun have done the right thing by putting it in the public domain. Ernie, very interesting message, and thank you for it. We'll hear from Colonel James Sunderland in just a second on the Falklands. I'd love to hear your views too. 0344 499 1000.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is talk.
Thank you to Stuart. He's been back in touch to say Vahid Beheshti is amazing. He's so interesting. I could listen to him for the entire show, to be honest. He was a great guest, certainly. And we're going to speak to another one now. That is James Sunderland, the former Conservative MP. But he's the main reason we have him on is not his political career, although that's part of it. Rather, he served in the Falklands twice. He was a colonel in the UK Army before entering politics. James, lovely to have you on the programme. How are you this evening?
Very good, Peter. Thank you very much indeed. And smarting, like many of your listeners, about the nonsense in the media over the Falkland Islands and the build-up to the World Cup semi-final.
Well, indeed, let's just hear some of that nonsense, not least from Gary Lineker, who always goes out of his way to offend people and be on the woke left. Let's see what he has said about Argentina.
England could face Argentina in a semi-final. We're getting ahead of ourselves a fraction, but so much history between our nations, isn't there? I mean, obviously, it was not that long ago two countries were at war, Falklands or Malvinas.
Somebody needs to superglue Lineker's mouth shut, says Paul. I can't disagree with that, but it's actually the Foreign Minister of the Falklands who has called Falkland Islanders artificially implanted as a population in a lengthy essay demanding Britain enters talks to hand over the territory. This is Pablo Quirno, who said that the 2013 referendum held on the archipelago in which islanders chose to remain British was illegitimate. He called for negotiations on the Falklands' future. James, as someone who fought there, as someone who saw comrades die there and indeed maimed, there's so many people who are still suffering with the physical and psychological injuries of that war more than 40 years ago. What's your reaction to what this Argentinian foreign minister has said?
Well, Peter, I wasn't there during the Falklands conflict. That was in 1982, long before my time.
Apologies.
I can recall watching it on the news as a 12-year-old, and I've served there twice since on two tours. So
I got that mixed up. I do apologise.
Don't worry at all. I'm not that old. But what I would say to you, Peter, is this. That the Argentinians have never had control of the Falklands. They've never owned the Falklands. They've never had any legitimate sovereignty claim over the Falklands. The British first had a settlement there in 1765 and have exercised continuous administrative control of the Falklands since 1833. And of course, in 1982, the task force sailed under the direction of then Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher to recapture the islands. So the idea that there's some sort of doubt over sovereignty is absolute nonsense. And I am disappointed with influencers like Gary Lineker, who know the truth, but who, for some reason, stokes the fires of wokeism by using a term that we don't recognise in the UK, in complete defiance of 255 servicemen who lost their lives during the Falklands War.
And we've had a military presence there for a very long time. When you were serving there, was there ever any, was it always just in the back of Falklanders' minds, and presumably those serving in the army there as well, that there could be, that this dispute was continuing, that there had been this awful war?
The relationship between the islanders and British forces in the Falklands could not be closer. We've got a permanent garrison there now at Mount Pleasant, so we've got radar sites across the islands as well, both on West Falkland and East Falkland. It's a very close relationship. And you mentioned earlier in 2013, the Falkland Islanders held a referendum where 99.8% of the population in the Falklands voted to remain British, voted to remain under the British flag. So the nonsense of the sovereignty question, it's got to go away now. I think we've proved beyond doubt that the Falklands are ours. But of course, the media stokes it up. We've got a very exciting World Cup semi-final coming along. Obviously, you've seen the segment in the news about the Argentinian players singing a song with Las Malvinas in the song. It's obviously designed to sort of intimidate and no doubt Thomas Tuchel's men are going to be immune to the threat, and they're going to come through with flying colours.
Do you think part of this could be a sort of psychological idea to try to freak out the England football team? Maybe that's too flippant a way of putting it, given the bloodshed that has occurred. But clearly, when you hear him saying, this foreign minister saying that any future referendum, saying none, he's disputed any future referendum, saying none organised unilaterally by the UK can have legal effect. We must not fall into the referendum trap.
Well, the legality is not in doubt. The referendum result is not in doubt. The sovereignty of the Falklands is not in doubt, and hopefully the result on Wednesday won't be in doubt either. It is about a bit of intimidation. I think it's designed to deflect away from the football. Quite clearly, because the world is watching, it's a good opportunity for these politicians to be raising the issue in Argentina. They've got a captive audience. I mean, no doubt that that the media worldwide will pick up on the conflict, which happened, over 40 years ago. I actually went to the Falklands in 2022 for the 40th anniversary. It was a remarkable event. And
tell us about that. Tell us what happened there and what was running through your mind when it did, because of course there was so much to remember. Such an important war, such an important thing that Margaret Thatcher did.
Well, we did a number of things actually. We marked the occasion with a ceremony at Port Stanley on the seafront there. The Princess Royal was with us. She's a remarkable champion of the Falklands, as indeed are the whole of the royal family, regular visitors to the islands. We also, most poignantly, went to visit the Argentinian war graves. We forget that over 650 Argentinian servicemen died in the Falklands War as well, and it's very important to pay respect to those. It was just a remarkable, it was a sobering, it was a very special anniversary. And I can't thank the Falklands government enough for their brilliant hospitality. We've got a very close relationship with them. The people are great friends of the UK. Of course, many are British in terms of their own ancestry. But to suggest that they were opposed to theirs, to suggest that they were somehow put on the islands by the British, absolute nonsense. This is their home. They want to be British. They voted to remain British, and long may it continue.
What do you think the effect of people like Gary Lineker even saying the words Las Malvinas actually means, even in the context of just saying, he didn't even clarify his remarks and say that's what the Argentinians call them. That's not what we call them. We call them the Falkland Islands. What do you think the effect of that is?
I mean, Gary Lineker, remarkable footballer. He was an excellent host of Match of the Day. I've got no issue at all personally with him. I mean, just a remarkable journalist. But he does slip into carelessness occasionally with what he says. I like to think it wasn't deliberate. I like to think that he wasn't stoking the fires, following the conflict in 1982. But the islands of the Falklands, the islands are not the less biggest, and I think ultimately he has to recognise the fact that he may have been a little bit irresponsible.
Yes, I think there's been a number of other occasions when that's happened as well. James, so many of our viewers and listeners, and the country indeed, is reeling from the very sad death of Ann Widdecombe, her murder. We know there's an ongoing police investigation at the moment. I'm actually going to be speaking to the independent reviewer of terrorism legislation in a few minutes' time, Jonathan Hall, KC. As someone who was a Conservative MP, part of the Conservative family, of course, James, she was a big part of that party. Then she went to the Brexit Party and Reform UK. How will you remember her?
Anne was a remarkable woman. I had the privilege of meeting her once. She left a lasting impression on me. I mean, she was just very forthright. She was very passionate. She had a fantastic career in Parliament. She was a minister and also a shadow minister. And she's moved to Reform. I mean, she's on the right of the political spectrum. She's religious. She was religious. She was very passionate about what she believed in. And, the awful circumstances of her murder, what we know about it, just utterly grim. And it's just a reminder for me as well that people who put their heads above the parapet, in terms of politicians in particular, are at risk. I was the last MP then to see David Amess alive. We flew back from Qatar on the Wednesday night. He was dead on the Friday morning. That hit me really quite hard. And of course, Joe Cox as well. It's just a reminder that we need to do more in Westminster to protect these public figures, particularly those who are outspoken. I think we need to be looking much more carefully at the whole issue of parliamentary security. Anne clearly had long retired as a parliamentarian. She was, 78, but still very active. And, my heart goes out to her family, her friends, and all those affected by this appalling murder.
How difficult is it when you are an MP, when you get those kind of things in your inbox, you get really abusive stuff? Often your staff are dealing with that, people maybe not paid that huge amount of money to deal with really abusive emails. It's clearly got worse in recent years as well. You talk about those deaths, and of course we go back further, Ian Gow, Ari Neve, and so on. But really, when it comes to the level of threat, it has gone up to a huge degree. How did you keep safe as an MP?
Well, I suppose I was just lucky. I tried to conduct myself in the right way. Former Army Colonel, public service to me runs through my DNA, and I conducted myself hopefully politely, respectfully, and didn't stoke those fires of division. But ultimately, there was a bit of abuse. I had a bit of vitriol, but nothing that worried me too much. But colleagues did. I mean, I can recall female colleagues wearing body armour in the Parliament that I served in. I'm looking at social media now. It's got a lot worse. There's no question at all that Labour politicians that I know well today and speak to, it's a lot worse now than it was when I was an MP 2 years ago. But it's where the line is crossed. It's where abuse and vitriol becomes physical. That's very hard to spot. It's very hard to understand when you might be a physical threat. But we can take precautions, we can take measures, we can have security. We sit with our backs to an escape route so we can get out if we need to. But the threat of an interpersonal attack or the threat of what happened at Ann Widdecombe, if indeed that was politically motivated, it's always there, and it is a worry.
Thank you very much. That's Colonel James Sunderland, former Conservative MP for Bracknell. He served in the Falklands a couple of times. Of course, we've had a presence there for such a long time, including after the war in 1982. Let's take a call from Harry in Sheffield. Harry, what's on your mind this evening?
You made my day. You have actually made my day.
I've made your day. Okay, thank you. I'm glad.
I have absolutely had a month. I've lost a few fish in my pond. Right, I was a bit depressed. But I went in the kitchen to pour a glass. I came back, as I was coming back in the living room, I heard you ask that Sean about Nigeria. Oh, and I couldn't sit down quick enough. I watched Joe's face, look at him. And I thought, answer that, lad. Just answer that. And he struggled. He absolutely struggled to answer that about Christians in Nigeria. It's not just Nigeria. It's all over the world.
There are a lot of genocides in the world, actual genocides, and we do need to focus on those. Harry, I'm sorry to hear about your fish.
No, man, it's the weather.
Right.
You know.
Too hot?
The weather.
Yeah.
Hey?
Well, listen, thanks for your call, Harry, and I hope you thank you for that very kind message, and I hope that things get a bit better as well. Harry says giving reaction to that interview a bit earlier on. Thank you to that. Maria's been in touch from Cornwall, who says, I'm so upset about Ann Widdecombe. I had so much respect for her. Hope her cat has been cared for. She dearly loved him. That's Aloysius. Is there any way you could find out? It may have witnessed the terrible situation. It was 24 hours before Ann was found. Even more tragic. As a fellow cat lover, I feel you would understand my concerns, says Maria in Cornwall. Maria, thank you for that. What I don't want to do is put a call in to maybe a press office and add to their burden, but I am very convinced, and I will make inquiries behind the scenes about that, Maria, but I'm sure that Aloysius is fine, because Ann Widdecombe had a lot of friends. She had a carer, she had various people, she had a gardener. There'll be people who will be looking after the cat, so please do not worry, but I will make inquiries behind the scenes to just make sure Aloysius is okay. It's a horrible, horrible situation, and certainly when anybody dies, even of natural causes, there is genuine concern, of course, for their animals, and people do worry about this as well when they are, maybe going into home, or they're thinking about their own life, for example. So, Maria, I've thought about that too, certainly, and I really appreciate your concern, and I will try to make some behind-the-scenes inquiries. I don't want to have any difficulty whatsoever for the inquiry team or for the police or anything like that. I don't want to add to their burden, but thank you, Maria, for that. Ernie says, Peter, I'm all for good journalism. It usually sorts the wheat from the chaff. It was a good journalism. I'm sure that doorbell footage wouldn't have been given to them by the alleged perpetrator. Who else would have it? It looks very staged to me, Ernie. Well, I'm not sure I agree with you, Ernie, but thank you for that query anyway. And it could have been a neighbour, it could have been across the road or something like that. Lots more to discuss, particularly in regard to Ann Widdecombe, because the Independent Reviewer of Terrorism Legislation, Jonathan Hall KC, is going to join us in just a second. I'd love your reaction to what he says. Whatever your thoughts, 0344 499 1000. We'll take as many calls as we can in the next hour.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It's just gone 9 o'clock. This is the Evening Exchange. I'm Peter Cardwell. Start of another week, a fascinating week in politics as well. Andy Burnham is going to become leader of the Labour Party on Friday. He is going to become Prime Minister next Monday. I just give you early warning, I will be in Downing Street on Monday reporting for this station throughout the day. This time next week, we will have a new Prime Minister. Are you as excited as Westminster is? Maybe it's just boring because there have been so many of them recently. We'll talk in a second to the independent reviewer of terrorism legislation, Jonathan Hall KC, because there's a lot around about Ann Widdecombe, the murder probe, what the police did and didn't do, what they said when they said it. I'd be very interested to hear from him. And also the IRGC, the Iranian part of the Iranian regime, have been prescribed today. I'd be interested to hear his thoughts on that. So much to discuss. 0344 499 1000 to get your view across. I'll take as many calls, texts, tweets and voice notes as I can between now and 10 o'clock. Whatever is on the tip of your tongue, whatever your opinion is, whether you think I'm talking nonsense or very clearly and good sense, 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can follow me on Twitter at Peter Cardwell. You can follow me on Instagram, confusingly, at Cardwell Peter. You can also send me a WhatsApp text message, a WhatsApp voice note on the main number. You can ring me on the main number too, 0344 499 1000. So much to discuss this evening and indeed right across the week here on the Evening Exchange, 7 till 10 every evening, Friday 7 till 9. Stay with me here on Talk. Many people in touch, and I will get to your calls, text, tweets and voice notes in a minute or two, but I want to speak first to Jonathan Hall Casey. He is the independent reviewer of terrorism legislation. Jonathan, thank you for joining me on the programme this evening.
Hi, good evening.
Can you tell me your thoughts, first of all, on Devon and Cornwall Police's conduct? Because we have heard from them today that counter-terror police will now be involved in the investigation into Ann Widdecombe's murder. It is interesting that they originally said that they did not believe there was a terrorism aspect to it. Now there appears there is, in their estimation, and they have rearrested a 28-year-old suspect to that end. Tell me your thoughts on that.
Well, my thoughts is that initially it looked as if Devon and Cornwall Police thought this was just a sort of local matter and there was the arrest of that individual. The impression was being given it was a burglary that went wrong. I understand at that stage, maybe that's why they made their point that there was no suggestion of any terrorism. However, once that arrest fell away and they arrested someone many miles away who'd obviously travelled down to carry out this murder, if that is what happened and it's an investigation, then I think that saying anything to steer the public away from terrorism was probably was certainly a misstep. I mean, the thing they should have done was to be just completely straightforward and say we don't know. And the best thing about that is A, it's honest, and B, it means you're not tripped up when new facts emerge. And what happens with these sorts of cases, they sort of develop. You might have a local force, then they get a whiff of something terrorist-like, or they need to call in the sort of extra capabilities of counter-terrorism police. Now we've got the full hog, which is counter-terrorism police are actually leading the investigation. So they've obviously got sufficient grounds to detain someone under the Terrorism Act, and they are leading the investigation. So look, the focus is the safety of politicians generally, the terrible murder to Ann Widdecombe. Communications are an issue, and they are not unimportant. I completely agree. I think that the police are getting better. So we had the events of Southport, and you recall what happened there. The police are getting better at releasing basic biographical detail, which I think is important, and they are being consistent. So in that respect, well done. But this was an error, I'm afraid.
You talk about that consistency of information. I think I understand this correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that there is a level of offence, there is a seriousness of offence at which they then release the ethnicity and details about the perpetrator. For example, if my phone was stolen, for example, and someone asked the police about that, they probably wouldn't give the ethnicity of the alleged perpetrator. They have in this case, when it comes to Ann Widdecombe's murder, certainly with the first person they arrested and then released without charge, he will no longer be part of the investigation, and they've done that. This appears to be being done consistently. That wasn't the case for a while, and in your view, this has become better.
It has become better, and I don't know, there's probably some policy document or some decision by a senior police officer which says if it reaches a level of particular public interest, particularly if there's going to be online speculation, then it's better to say something true and sober and accurate than allow people to speculate endlessly about the identity. So there's a policy somewhere, I haven't seen it, but I think things have improved. Things would have been even better if Devon and Cornwall Police had said, right, we've now got to go back to the beginning, we've got an open mind, we don't know what the position is.
Yes, and there is a thought about that kind of golden rule, really, about investigations that you've been talking about today as well, Jonathan. Let's talk about politicians having security. There's been a bit of a political row, which I do not seek to invite you into at all, and I'm sure you're scrupulously independent. But Reform UK are saying that their individual MPs have been given protection. They're saying that Nigel Farage, another story in the iPaper tomorrow, they're reporting this evening that he was offered various bits of protection. When it comes to the MPs being protected, at what level do you think that is? How serious a threat do you think it is? Because, and how should it be done? Because we're in a situation where someone who, yes, in the public eye, no doubt about that, but nonetheless hasn't been an active, and I should say, elected politician correctly, an elected politician for some years, is targeted with this murder.
Well, look, I'm not a technical protection expert, so I can't tell you precisely what level you need to have, whether it has to be CCTV or armed police or whatever. I think what I could say, though, is that it's ultra important for democracy. So this is what I call core national security. Politicians of any stripe or party are absolutely the lifeblood of our democracy, and they absolutely deserve protection. So it's something with this sort of slight uptick in acceptability amongst the general public of political violence. If you look at the polling, that's what's being said at the moment. And you recall, I think it was a year ago, where an MP in the House of Commons said that he felt that he couldn't articulate his position because of threats in his constituency. I think this is really, really worrying. It's not the only thing that terrorism is about. Terrorism is also about protecting the public generally. There's been that, what sounds like a very serious threat to life at some religious Muslim festival, which was stopped by the police, thankfully. So counter-terrorism deals with lots of things. I do think that protecting politicians is ultra important. And that also means actually protecting past politicians, because if you're someone who wants to go into public life and become a politician, and frankly, we want as many good people as possible to do it, you don't want to think that having gone into politics means that you are at risk for life. So I don't think this could be more important, actually. And it's right to say that there have been other politicians of different parties who've been threatened, but frankly, nothing should take away from the fact that at the moment it is a former Reform MP who has, party member, who has been murdered, and it's very serious.
I just wonder, I mean, obviously it's incredibly expensive, and there are only, I think, 6 members of the Cabinet who have full protection 24 hours, and previous Prime Ministers as well. Obviously there's an assessment of threat. I mean, MPs need to be accessible. They need to be people who people can come up to in the street and just have a chat with. And they also have this, I used to work in politics, and they have this very strange life where they're in one of the most, if not the most protected building in the country, the Palace of Westminster, where you literally have armed guards outside and inside, and yet they spend at least part of their week completely or almost completely unprotected, often in village halls, at fetes, at all sorts of events and surgeries where the level of protection is a lot lower.
Yes, I agree. There are 2 aspects, aren't there? There's the need to be able to relate to ordinary members of the public, and that's really important. And there's also the fact that, frankly, being under full protection is probably a complete nightmare, because it means you can't just sort of do normal things. Again, would put normal people off from becoming politicians. I don't know, frankly, what the right balance is. I suppose we are to some extent better off in the UK. I mean, it sounds terrible to talk about anything better off in the light of this terrible murder, but we don't have the volume of firearms and the sorts of assassination by guns and sniper risk that they have in America. But you're right to say it's a serious matter, and we have to take it seriously.
What is your view on the online threat as well, and how can that be dealt with through terrorism legislation, if at all? Because there are many threats to life through that, some of which are reported and the police do very little about, and others that are, you know, very, very serious.
Well, I think for politicians, and I said this, I think 2 years ago, actually, I think for politicians, you just have to take it very seriously, because there is a sort of group of people who get a lot of inspiration and meaning from the internet. It feels weird, doesn't it? You know, most people will feel inspired by their family and their friends or any organisations they're members of. But we do know that there are lone actors now who get a huge amount of meaning and importance, including a sense of mission from the internet. So I think that with politicians, I wouldn't take a sort of free speech absolutist line or a sort of, oh, well, it's all just froth and nonsense. If politicians, and there have been particularly female politicians, get it in the neck so badly, sort of stalky threat stuff, or Jewish politicians, for example, and no doubt Muslim politicians as well, just that thing, I would take that seriously, because what there will be, I'm afraid, is individuals who are looking at that sort of discourse and going, do you know what, I'll have some of that, and I want to convert talk into action.
Yeah. The prescription of the IRGC has happened today. How do you assess the level of threat from the Iranian regime to the UK? Because we know of these 7 attacks that have been public. No doubt there'll be a lot more behind the scenes with MI5 and MI6 that we're not familiar with and will never be familiar with. In your view, this prescription, will it change things?
It gives the police a few bits and bobs, and when I say bits and bobs, that sounds like I'm minimising it. I'm not. What it allows the police to do is to credibly stand in front of New Scotland Yard and say to people who are thinking, oh, maybe I'll take that £500 to go and do a little minor arson. It allows them credibly to say that is precisely the sort of conduct that is going to assist a foreign intelligence service, or now a designated body like the IRGC, or this Islamic movement for the Companions of the Right. So if you do that sort of conduct, and this is the key thing, if you do that sort of conduct, then you are at risk of committing an ultra-serious offence. So it does add something there. And also behind the scenes, as you say, if, for example, there's an individual who wants to come into the UK is associated with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, then you can imagine the Home Secretary will get a briefing and make a decision to, you know, to remove a visa or something like that. So it will, I think it will make a difference. And the key thing, I think what the government will be hoping in particular, is that those proxies who are willing to help those people will start to feel even more frightened about what will happen to them if they get caught.
Yes, certainly, and that would be only a good thing. It's interesting, certainly, that there has been so much discussion about this. Why do you think it has taken so long?
Well, 2 reasons. One is that there was this sort of endless trap of people talking about, well, they've got to be prescribed under the Terrorism Act. And the government, I think, its instinct was right, but it didn't bite the bullet. And actually, in the end, I was commissioned last year to look at this. And when you look at the law, Terrorism Act is not designed to deal with states and governments. Prescription is about banning something, but you can't really have one government saying to another government, we ban you from having a military, we ban you from having an intelligence service or whatever. So once that had been done, there was a bit of delay, frankly. I mean, the government knew my views and they'd accepted my views last May, but they had to bring forward legislation. They did that quite quickly, and it went through in 4 weeks, and it was given royal assent last week, and then today it was activated. So I think part of the delay was just not biting the bullet and accepting that Terrorism Act was never going to work.
Yes, certainly. Jonathan, really interesting to talk to you, and thank you very much for joining us this evening. Jonathan Hall, KC, the independent reviewer of terrorism legislation. What do you make of what he said there? 0344 499 1000. Is this the right path? Has enough been done on it? Keith in Nottingham says, after a few days of sensitive media coverage, particularly on Talk, and God bless Alex Phillips and Mark Dolan particularly, says Keith, there are sadly individuals who have said on camera some awful things about a selfless lady who portrayed something that was actually good in British politics. The likes of the BBC and Sky, particularly Adam Bolton, should be named and shamed, says Keith in Nottingham. Well, in fairness to Adam Bolton, who I was very critical of on Friday, I know Adam Bolton, I've known him for 15 years, he has apologised on his Twitter. He has apologised for his remarks on Ann Widdecombe and what he said, Keith, so you might want to have a quick look at what he said there. Anne says, my cat Boots passed away on Friday, age 5. Anne, I'm very sorry to... Angie, apologies. My cat Boots passed away on Friday, age 5. I'm very sorry to hear that, Angie. I like to think he wanted to meet Bonnie Tyler and Ann Widdecombe. Take care of him, Anne. He'll be the tuxedo cat causing havoc, chasing his niece Tigger around heaven. You'll never be forgotten, Anne. Stuart says, if all these politicians like Andy Burnham are so awful, then why have you never got up the ladder as far as they have? Are you jealous, or do you simply not have the bottle to do it, Peter? I've never been an elected politician apart from once, Stuart, when I was on the student committee, which I didn't even last the full year on. I have great admiration for people who put themselves out there, who are elected, who go ahead and govern the country. I know a bit about politics because I've worked on the inside, and I know what makes a good politician and a bad politician. I know what makes good politics and bad politics. And as I often say, Stuart, you know, just because I haven't been to Iraq doesn't mean I don't have views on it. And just because people aren't actively involved in politics doesn't mean they can't have as informed an opinion. So I welcome yours, Stuart, and if you want to send me your views through, as you have on a number of occasions this evening, you're very, very welcome to do so. And whether I agree with them or not, I will attempt anyway to read them out whilst giving everybody a chance to have their say. Craig says, hi Peter, I'm an ex-serviceman. I served in the Falklands, not during the war but after, and it meant I had a relaxed service where I could enjoy the islands. I got to meet a lot of the islanders, but they do not want to be anything other than British. They're more British than most of us. Joanna says, on Gary Lineker, really, he shouldn't have given the airtime. A grifter. Netflix are finding out he's irrelevant. My uncle, who was in the Navy for the last year of World War II, was on a supply ship between the Ascension Islands and the Falklands, and in the bay when Sir Galahad was hit, he died with the screams of men burning on Sir Galahad as raw as the day it happened. My goodness. Another person says, surely the population of Argentina itself, mostly Spanish, is introduced and therefore artificial by the same logic. Another person has said, one of the deciding factors in genocide is intent. Hamas committed genocide on the 7th of October as their mission was to wipe out all Israelis, whereas Israel does not have the intent to wipe out all Palestinians, which they could have proved consistently. And Jules in Bristol says, I'm glad you read Maria's message earlier. I contacted Alex on Sunday for exactly the same thing, knowing she too loves cats and knew Anne personally, but I don't know if she saw it. We do get a lot of messages, and I can't speak for other presenters, but I'm sure Alex would have read that out if it had been put in front of her. But of course, we get lots of messages that we don't read out, unfortunately, just because we get so many, but you're very, very welcome to send them in. Poor Aloysius says, Jules in Bristol will be traumatised. Please could you let all us cat lovers know if you find out. Jules, in the break, I'm going to text someone who might know about this, 2 people actually who might know about this, and if I can report back by the end of the programme, I will. If those people don't get back to me by the end of the programme, I will tell you tomorrow. And I totally get this. I totally understand this. I know there'll be people shouting at the radio saying, for goodness sake, it's a cat, who cares? This is a really important thing to a lot of people, and it's something that I care about as well. I'm sure there were really good people around Ann Widdecombe. She had a lot of friends and family, people who looked after her, and of course I'm sure they're looking after Aloysius, but I will double check that, and if I hear anything, I promise to come back to you either by the end of the programme or tomorrow night. As soon as I hear, you will know. Jules in Bristol, thank you for that. We'll go to the phones in just a second. If you want to get on the phone and let me know your thoughts, please do so. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks everybody who's been in touch. Jules says thank you. As just in the break, I've messaged one of those people, and if that person gets back to me by the end of the programme, Jules, I promise you will know within a few minutes or two. And Penny in Essex, hi Penny, lovely to hear from you. She says, good evening Peter, good evening. Speaking to the man about anti-terrorism, could you please change the heading from Widdecombe death to Ann Widdecombe death? It's very disrespectful. I don't think it is disrespectful, Penny, and certainly we only have a certain number of characters in those different, in those little straps that you see at the bottom of the screen. So Widdecombe is quite a long word, and we can't fit in the word Ann there. So there's absolutely no disrespect whatsoever to Ann Widdecombe. In fact, every single person at the station is very respectful towards her memory and simply wants the perpetrator to be brought to justice and for justice to be served and to serve its course, certainly. So there's no disrespect, no intended disrespect whatsoever, Penny. But thank you for your message. I really appreciate it, and please do keep sending them in. You're a great correspondent and you always have great common sense, Penny. It's always nice when I hear and see your messages in front of me. The Telegraph has a story now. It's interesting actually. Throughout the evening, of course, we get the papers will start putting up some of their stories online, and the Telegraph has said that benefits claimants have been given permission to ignore hosepipe bans. This is mad. 2 water companies have been accused of two-tier restrictions, as they have said that benefit claimants can ignore hosepipe bans. We'll get the latest on that. Perhaps the top team behind the glass would print out the copy for me. I'd be very interested to hear from that. On that, I should say. Let's speak to Jay in London, who wants to have some thoughts, or has some thoughts, on Adam Bolton, the broadcaster, who said on Friday he was talking about Ann Widdecombe and said she was an old maid and a spinster, and indeed talked about her apparent virginity. Jay, what are your thoughts on this?
Oh, hi, Peter. Thank you. I appreciate what our talk has covered this event. But no, I didn't hear Adam Bolton apologise at all. I didn't see in the written thing any apology.
He has apologised on his Twitter. What do you make of his original comments?
Did he actually say, I'm sorry?
Do you know what? I am looking at it on my phone right now. You tell me your opinion, and hopefully by the time you've finished in 20 or 30 seconds, I'll have it in front of me.
I thought he just sort of said, I made a mistake, or
I will tell you exactly what he says. In just a second when I find it, but tell me your opinion first.
Well, I just didn't hear an apology. He could have just said, I'm sorry. Just really that simple. But I just I thought it was kind of rather weaselly. I only saw one particular written thing, but I didn't see any apology in it at all.
Well, I am attempting to find... Here we are. An apology, says Adam Bolton. This was a couple of days ago. I'm going to read it out. I was seriously wrong and insensitive in one of the several media appearances I made yesterday. That would be referring to Friday, the Sky interview. I was seriously wrong and insensitive in one of the several media appearances I made yesterday in relation to the death of Ann Widdecombe. I got the timing and tone of my initial word portrait of her wrong. Of course, I shared and share the horror at her murder and the respect for her remarkable and feisty political career. I also know that many people loved her for her subsequent showbiz stardom. Her untimely death is a horrible thing. My mistaken view was that in the context of rolling news coverage, I was being asked to contribute as an obituarist who had known her and interacted with her since the 1980s. This approach was premature. At no point was I expressing my personal feelings about her. That's not what I do. I was discussing her life in the round based on the record of known facts and what she has said about herself, along with some recollections of our personal interactions. My choice of words on the spur of the moment was clumsy. I did not intend to offend, though obviously I did. I'm a freelance contributor to a number of outlets. I am responsible for what I say, not those who I work for. I make this apology freely because I now recognise I got this badly wrong. It is on me. I also apologise to Sky News and Times Radio for the unwarranted criticism they have received for my own mistake.
All right, I missed that last bit.
Are you happy enough, Jay? Do you think he's done the right thing?
I think he could have started by just saying, I'm sorry. It would be so much simpler. It does seem still seems to me quite self-justifying, but nevertheless, there was the word apology at the end. So I'm mistaken, and I apologise.
Okay. Jay, listen, thank you for that. I appreciate that. That's Jay in London. Let's go to Michael in Birmingham. You have some thoughts on Ann Widdecombe. Michael, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Yeah, hello, Peter.
Hi there.
Just one thing. I heard that you and the gentleman talking about terrorism saying things had kind of got better when revealing the background of the suspects. I'm afraid over the weekend there was a little bit of two-tierism. I won't go into detail, but there was a serious case, I won't go into any more detail than that, where they only described the person arrested as a man.
Yes.
They didn't give his ethnicity for that. And it's actually more serious than the Ann Widdecombe case in terms of what happened. But I won't say any more than that. But what I am going to say is another angle on this. What I see from young lefties and general people on the left, whatever happened to respect for elderly people? So many of them seem to be sending wicked messages, not just about Ann Widdecombe, but about old people in general, kind of hoping that they die off and revelling in them dying off.
This comes in a lot with when people talk about the Brexit referendum. I'm sure you've seen this,
Definitely.
Michael, where they say, well, it was 10 years ago, a lot of those people will be dead by now, therefore, you know, why do we care about older people? Well, a referendum is a snapshot of what people thought at that time. And yes, circumstances can change, but I don't think referendums should be rerun.
No, and there's also a little bit of gaslighting. I heard on another station somebody over the weekend talking about how pensioners and elderly people are the most entitled and they take out far more they contribute and should have their things taxed and pensions cut. And wait a minute. These people, you know, I'm reaching that age. Some people have been working in this country, you know, since when the Vietnam War was still on in the mid-70s and early 70s and paying tax since then and taken very, very little out of it in terms of unemployment benefit. But these kind of like new, younger people, that doesn't seem to count.
There is a point, Michael, it may not be a particularly nice point to make, but there is a point that often if people live for a very long time, and it's great that people are living longer, they'll often take more out of their pension than they have paid in necessarily. I mean, that's just a sort of financial point. I don't think it demonises older people to make that point, but I totally agree with you that there is certainly a sniffiness and a kind of, oh, well, you know, you're not working anymore, you're retired. I want retired people to have a wonderful life. I do think there is a generational divide, though, between people who are paying an awful lot of tax thinking, hold on a second, here are pensioners who, many of whom have very tough lives, but many of whom have a very nice life as well, Michael.
Yeah, and don't forget, we're talking about proportions. I mean, you know, what you were paying in 1975 was just the same proportion as you're paying in 2025, roughly, you know, in terms of your deductions. So let's get that right.
Yes.
And I still say that pensioners, well, yeah, let them have a long life. They have put in for a long time because I hate to say it, there's people coming from this country costing us billions in benefits every month who haven't given a damn thing.
Well, you're absolutely right, and we're going to talk in just a second, Michael, about 128 people crossing the channel in one small boat. Just before we do that, and thank you for your call, Michael, let's speak to Greg in Edinburgh about the nature of some of this information that has come out, then changed, 180-degree U-turns by, well, of course, it's a U-turn, why wouldn't it be 180 degrees, by the Devon and Cornwall Police. Greg, what's your perspective in Edinburgh on this?
Well, first of all, hello, Peter.
Hello, good to talk to you.
And to you. It was really to come a bit to the not the rescue, but the defence of Devon and Cornwall Police, and to the police in general, and maybe to point a bit of a finger at the press and the media. And as I said to your producer, it's more the nature of the media now, the 24-hour news cycle, that there just seems to be this need to fill it. And that, you know that, and I've even heard it on talk radio, that people will say, let's not speculate, but. There's always a but. They can't just say, something's happened, these are the facts that we know it. And
but I agree with you. I realise I've just said but, Greg. The point I suppose I would make is, yes, find out what the facts are, but if you're told this doesn't involve terrorism and then suddenly counter-terrorism police, I mean, why not just say nothing? Why not just say, look, we're keeping an open mind, we're following the facts, Does it involve, then a journalist puts up their hand and says, does this involve terrorism? And they say, we're keeping an open mind, we're ruling nothing in and nothing out. Is it political? We're ruling nothing in and nothing out. Stick to those lines. As I've seen, you know, myself, if you rule something out and then have to go back, it is embarrassing.
Yeah, that's true. But the pressure on police forces and other bodies to give information when they should just be told, look, you're not getting it, and it's this entitlement amongst not just the press but all of us that we have a right to know. Well, sometimes we should just be told at this point in time you don't.
Well, and any good journalist, I basically agree with you, Greg. And actually, when it comes to something like you know, a big attack that happens, like for example, a very, very good point is a very good example. A horrific story was when that man drove a car into people in Liverpool, and I was on air. And a load of people, friends of mine, were messaging me. There were people, colleagues of mine, saying, well, this is probably an Islamist terrorist, because that's what they do. And there have been many instances where Islamist terrorists have done exactly that, have driven cars into and used cars as a weapon into crowds and killed people. That wasn't the case with the Liverpool incident. That wasn't what happened. It wasn't anything to do with terrorism. It wasn't anything to do with Islamists. It was a horrendous, dreadful, dreadful attack. It was an awful thing for the people involved. But factually, it was nothing to do with Islamism. And we as journalists have to be really, really careful to say, OK, whilst that has been used as a tactic by Islamists previously, we just don't know at the moment. I mean, would you say that's speculation, Greg, or would you say that's fair comment?
Well, for a start, obviously the media, such as yourselves or the press media, or they can't control social media now.
Yeah,
what's goes out there. That's you know, whatever people put on social media or tweet or whatever, which is just completely made up or conjecture, they can't control.
Yeah.
But they cannot add to that. I mean, for example, I heard on radio right away, or fairly soon after Ms. Widdecombe was murdered, that she'd been found blood-stained and bludgeoned about the head and in the house. That should be nowhere in the media. And
why? Why?
Because that at that early stage, that is party to the criminal investigation that could be very important to a criminal investigation.
What would you say, Greg? OK, this is a really interesting conversation, Greg, and I really appreciate you giving me a ring this evening. What would you say if I said, which I'm about to now, previously we were told there wasn't a terrorism aspect to this, that changed. Previously we were told there wasn't a political element to this. Today, the police said, again, there is no political element to this. But given they've changed their mind and changed their stance on the counter-terror thing, it wouldn't surprise me if there was a political element to this. She was a politician and a very prominent political figure. Is what I have just said something you think I shouldn't say, Greg?
I think the police should be saying virtually nothing to the press unless it is a request for specific information. If the police are saying there's an inquiry ongoing, you don't need to know at this point unless it's something like we're looking for a blue car with a registration number, or we're looking for a man in a green jersey, or even the generic. If anyone thinks they have seen something suspicious at the time, get in touch with us. But to go any further, particularly when it's under pressure by the press, I think the police should just be allowed to say, no, there's an inquiry going on, particularly in the first crucial times, without this constant need for them to be dealing with the press 24 hours a day.
OK. Greg, really interesting points there, and thank you for them. That's Greg in Edinburgh then. Debbie says that apology you just read out from Adam Bolton was just to save his job. These people need to be taken off air until they realise what they've done. Put them in the corner facing the wall, says Debbie. Nat in Tel Aviv says Adam Bolton was clearly advised to apologise, that is. Well, I don't know if that's the case or not, but thank you for that, Nat. Alison says, good evening, Peter. People with blue badges are also exempt from the hosepipe ban. We're hearing that from the Telegraph this evening. In fact, I have this article article in front of me here. MPs have criticised two-tier restrictions that allow benefits recipients with 3 children to hose their gardens. They've been given permission to ignore hosepipe bans. 2 water companies have been accused of two-tier restrictions after allowing families on benefits to flout the restrictions. 3 34-degree heat waves so far this year have led to hosepipe bans across England to reduce the looming threat. However, while millions of Southern Water and Affinity Water customers have been under the ban since Friday, thousands on a Water Sure tariff are exempt. The scheme caps water bills for low-income households and those who must use large amounts of water for essential needs. Those who use sprinklers to fill ponds and pools are ineligible. They must be claiming benefits. They must have 3 or more children under 19 in full-time education and have someone in their household with a medical condition that requires significant amounts of water. More than 5 million people are affected by hosepipe bans. They told The Telegraph, these 2 companies, that the exemption for Water Sure customers was intended to ensure disabled people are not put at risk. But Cambridge Water uses the Water Sure tariff for exemption eligibility, but only applies to those with a disability that makes using a watering can very difficult. Interesting. OK. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about what Petri Hoskin has coming up in her programme between 10 and 1. We'll also speak about the story that we were talking about the other night about tagging, and David Shipley, who is a prisons commentator, investigative journalist himself, has talked about that. Also, Shabana Mahmood changing the law to deport the Rochdale rapist, and then recording 128 people crossing the channel in one small boat. Loads to discuss with David in just a second. Stay with us.
Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to win a massive £26,000.
The question is, what would you do with all that money?
I don't know. We've got a wedding.
I would buy a camper van.
Probably just like clothes, yeah.
Go on a big holiday. Emigrate.
So if you fancy getting your hands on £26,000 tax-free, here's all the details you need to enter.
For your chance to win, visit talk.tv/win or text TALK to 83338 by 6 p.m. on the 20th of July 2026. Texts cost £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or send your name and number by post to Comp 1 PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by midnight on the 23rd of July 2026. 18 plus, UK residents only. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talk.tv/win.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to everyone who has been in touch. Phil says, as you stated, pensioners may take out more than they put in, but many don't. However, the fact is they put in, which is more than some people in this country, and most who have entered this country without paying in anything. Maybe this should be where savings are made, says Phil. Penny says, I know you're all very respectful of Ann Widdecombe. It just sounded not right. Thank you for explaining the number of letters that we have. I was talking earlier on for Penny, the number of characters we have in our bar at the bottom of the screen. I was also worried about Ann's moggy and texted earlier about him, says Penny. Thank you, Penny. I will absolutely tell you when I know anything about Aloysius. I have messaged one person who knows, and in a minute or two in the next break I will message another person. Alex says, I just woke up happy to see the cat is being talked about. I'm sure Aloysius will get a good home. Paul in Australia says, these idiots having a go at pensioners, they forget one thing. They have parents who will be or are pensioners. They brought them up and took care of them. Wendy says, I'd like Adam Bolton to be interviewed by a lady and answer the question, what does he find distasteful, noteworthy or uncomfortable about someone being a virgin, and why does he think someone's sexual experience is his business? Stuart says, Michael and Peter, people are not against old people and wish them dead, but there is nothing wrong with negative comments about old people. All people are unique, and when old people criticise youngsters and use the "I've worked hard all of my life and hardly get any more," the urge to tell them that if they'd worked harder at school or done college courses later in life, then they might have more money. Same old people look for sympathy votes and manipulate youngsters. Andy says, I take it from now on when crime is committed and they don't state it was a white man, it means it was a brown or black man, because they never say it was a brown man, do they, says Andy. Well, actually, I have heard ethnicities given of other races as well, but listen, this is a particularly high-profile case, certainly, and 2 white men were arrested, 1 released without charge, the other continuing to be questioned. Right then, I want to talk to David Shipley now, who's an investigative journalist and former prisoner himself, on Shabana Mahmood changing the law to attempt to deport the Rochdale rape gang's leader. He was sentenced to 19 years in prison, served 14. The law is pretty complicated here, David, isn't it? But the Home Secretary attempting to change this today. Tell me your thoughts on this. Good to have you on the programme.
Thank you. Yeah, so she's going to try to introduce an amendment to an old piece of legislation which would prevent him being deported because he had lived here for so long before he was sent to prison. And she's going to try to create a carve-out that just applies to particular very, very serious offences, because they were concerned this might mean that the Windrush migrants, for example, could be deported. I think the problem is, first of all, this is a very roundabout way of doing it. If Parliament wanted, it could just pass a very quick one-line bill, deportation of Shabir Ahmed bill. And also, the issue is not really our willingness to deport him. It's the fact that Pakistan are saying no.
Yes. Have they? And tell us about their grounds for saying no and the way in which we could persuade them, cajole them. There are various options here.
Well, I think their key argument actually is, this guy has been in Britain for 60 years. He left when he was a teenager. It's not really our problem. You deal with it, which I'm not entirely unsympathetic to. I think it's a failure of our justice system that Shabir Ahmed is out of prison. He was convicted of 30 counts of child rape. So he served actually less than 6 months for each of those counts of child rape. I don't actually think we should have released him, but here we are. And they seem to be sending a few different signals. They're briefing different British news outlets. In some places, they're suggesting that if we were to hand over some Pakistani political dissidents, then maybe they take Shabir Ahmed with them. Elsewhere, they're saying you can't threaten us, we won't take him. And in one publication, actually, they were suggesting that they'd been threatened over visas for Pakistanis, which I think would actually be quite a powerful negotiating lever for the British state.
Yes, very, very interesting. It'll be interesting to see what happens there as well. You've written a fascinating article for The Spectator as well. Labour can't blame the Tories for Britain's tagging crisis. Electronic monitoring at the heart of the government's plan for the justice system. I remember this, alcohol tags as well, even when I was at the Ministry of Justice. But of course, there have been many who are simply not wearing the tags or have got them off. Tell us your thoughts for those who haven't had the benefit of your article, of reading your article.
Sure. So tags are put on people, generally speaking, when they're released from prison and they serve some of their sentence on tag, usually abiding by a curfew, or they are put on some people when they're on bail awaiting sentencing or trial. That's to make sure they abide again by a curfew. And the idea is that you wear that tag all the time. Just under 2 years ago, I discovered that quite a lot of people were not, in fact, being tagged for weeks after they'd been released from prison, creating very obvious public protection issues. And since then, the government's been trying to get a grip on this.
Why were they, sorry to interrupt you, why were they not being tagged immediately? You would think, tag them in the prison the day they're released. I mean, surely that would make sense. Why wasn't that happening? Was it resources?
Well, that's a good question. This is actually one of those systems, I think, where there's so many different bits of the state that don't really talk to each other. So the prisons would release people. They would go to the probation office on their first day. They wouldn't be tagged at the probation office, then go home. And then the outsourced tagging provider, the Serco, was supposed to come round and tag them. But it turned out it just wasn't.
Yes.
And what's a bit concerning is that we're almost 2 years later and the National Audit Office have brought out a report on this now. And it's actually not really clear what the scale of the problem is. It's an astonishing report to read, actually. I mean, you may not read many National Audit Office reports, but this one is really bleak reading. They say they don't actually know. They say it's unknown how many people should be tagged but aren't tagged.
I mean, that's astonishing, isn't it? I mean, there are basic levels of competence that are not happening within the prison and probation service.
Yeah, and the Ministry of Justice say, well, some of them we might have recalled them to prison, some of them maybe we have tagged them and we just don't think we have. There's all these reasons, but what it all points to is a complete ignorance of actually what's going on in the system. And even worse, they don't even know how many people they've sanctioned for not wearing tags. If you rip your tag off or refuse to wear it, you're supposed to be sanctioned in some way. And the National Audit also said they just felt that breaches of sanctions when they observed in probation were just not being treated seriously. They were just sort of seen as something that happens and we kind of nod it through and nothing really goes on. And, for the National Audit Office to be saying there's a real public protection risk here, it's a very worrying thing, especially because the government's about to massively expand tagging. The presumption from this autumn is going to be that everyone who's released from prison wears a tag.
But clearly there are real basics of the system, David, that are not working right now. So if they can't get the basics right with everyone who's there at the moment, they're going to release more people, including dangerous people, people they said they weren't going to release previously, that David Lammy is now releasing, at least for the next week when he's Justice Secretary. I would imagine this time next week he won't be Justice Secretary. And we're in a situation where they can't get the basics right here. So if they're expanding a system that doesn't work, that should worry us all, shouldn't it?
It should, yeah. I think it's very concerning. And, the government always talks about the fact they inherited a system in crisis, which they did. But the thing is, they've been in charge of the tagging system for 2 years now, and they've been putting a huge amount of pressure, I know, on Serco. They've been trying to get the systems to work. But we're still in a situation where the police database, the prison database, the probation database, and Serco's database don't talk to each other. The result of that is that no one really has a handle on what's going on. And that is a really serious issue, as you just said. If we're releasing dangerous men in their many thousands, and more of them are going to be supervised in the community for longer as a result of the Sentencing Act, we've got to be able to do the basics right. Tagging is the heart of how the government intends to manage people in the community, and it's just not working.
Yeah. Thank you very much, David. Appreciate your contribution this evening. We didn't even get to the 128 people crossing the channel on one small boat, but that is this worrying statistic today. Really appreciate David joining us. He's an investigative journalist and former prisoner. What do you think about what he said there? 0344 499 1000. We'll take more of your calls, text, tweets and voice notes in just a second. And Alex in Cardiff has sent in some interesting information about Aloysius, which was, of course, the name of Ann Widdecombe's cat. Saint Aloysius Gonzaga was born in 1568 to an Italian noble family. His dad wanted him to be a soldier, but at just 7 he had a deep spiritual awakening and started praying intensely. He gave up his inheritance to join the Jesuits, which his father fought hard against. As a novice in Rome, he was known for his extreme piety and frequent ecstasies. When plague hit in 1591, he volunteered to nurse the sick, caught the disease himself, and died at 23. He's now the patron saint of youth, students and AIDS caregivers. Pretty inspiring life for someone so young, says Alex. Serco again, says Debbie, are they the ones running this bloody country, and where are they based? Phil says if Pakistan won't take this evil creature back, then simply stop all money going to them. Stop all visas, and Trump likes to use tariffs. All free legal assistance should be taken away from him, as barristers and solicitors are simply milking the system. They're leeches. He should also be in prison until this is sorted. Emma says my household is exempt from the hosepipe ban due to disability. However, grass and plants dying isn't putting my health at risk. If anything, going out in the heat to use my hosepipe would be more of a health risk. Very interesting perspective from Emma, thank you. Ernie says, Peter, so this government froze us pensioners in the winter, is now not including us in the exemption of the hosepipe ban. Are they going to try to fry us? You've got to love this socialist government. And Alex says, I disagree with Greg. People aren't stupid. Greg, who talked to us earlier on. It's not just random getting in your car and driving 300 miles to kill somebody. The problem is with social media. Without information, there's a vacuum. Many people start saying untrue things. The police have to manage that. I will be extremely surprised if this isn't politically motivated. The police have had a job and think they will have conducted the investigation quite well to catch the suspect so quickly. It's a fine line they have to walk. Should say it's a suspect, hasn't been charged, hasn't been convicted. We don't know if he did it or not. And of course, the law applies to us as journalists as it does to everybody else. And Alex, thank you for that. And Greg, I found a very interesting conversation earlier on. We'll speak to Petri Hoskin in a second. We'll take more of your calls, text, tweets and voice notes too. Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks everybody who's been in touch. Including Gary, who says, did you notice how many of the people on social media, like for example Peter Tatchell, who've not exactly celebrating the death of Ann Widdecombe, were taking the opportunity to post condemnations of her for her attitude to gay marriage? They're the same people who regularly protest on their support for the people of Gaza. They would be the same people of Gaza who put into government Hamas, the fanatical terror group that throws gay people off roofs. Gary, it's a fair point, although I think there are many innocent people in Gaza who hate Hamas and were really intimidated into voting them in, and of course there hasn't been an election there in 21 years. But I do find it really weird when you have Peter Tatchell or the group Queers for Palestine, for example, supporting the Palestinian people, many of whom would not support them. Great show, says Kim. You need to check the government prisoner tag scheme. As I've been told from probation that the tag scheme is finished. No prisoner will be tagged again from the end of July. I just don't think that's true, Kim. So thanks very much for that. But I think what David says is accurate. I appreciate your message. Let's go to Michael in Sunderland, who wants to react, I think, to what Greg in Edinburgh was saying. Michael, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, Peter. Thanks for taking my call. I think the high profiling of the Henry Novak case and the false reporting of a lot of incidents in it has made the police change their attitude to why they've now changed back to what is the truth instead of trying to gaslight us.
Yeah, it's interesting, I think, with Axel Radicabana as well, the perpetrator of the Southport murders. There was a lot going around about, a lot of people saying he'd come over on a small boat, for example. That wasn't true.
Oh, yes, I appreciate that as well, but that's when people get onto the social media and they speculate about what was said. So instead of coming out and just telling us if he's white or whatever, it doesn't matter. Yeah. It's the crime that...
So do you think the policy now is the right one, Michael?
Yes, I think the general public... I'm 60-odd years old, right, and over the last 10 years in particular, it is amazing how the dynamics of reporting from different media outlets has changed. Some are so biased, it is unbelievable the way they go on. But it doesn't matter what colour or nationality the person is get us the truth.
Yeah.
And they shouldn't. And
just give us the basic detail. Michael, listen, thanks. I appreciate your call. Some good points there. Peter is in Thame in Oxfordshire, lovely part of the world, been there myself. Peter, what are your thoughts on the Falklands?
Oh, hello, Peter.
Hello there.
Well, I put a slant on the Falkland Islands.
Yes.
The Argentina and Spain are philosophically and religiously much the same.
Mm-hmm.
And during when they invaded the Falkland Islands, they took a boatload of priests with them. Children in the Falkland Islands were then herded into a large room and forced to take part in Catholic ceremonies.
When was this, Peter? What sort of era are we talking about here?
Well, this was during the Falkland Islands, during the war.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that. Right, okay.
Yes, when they invaded,
yes,
they took a load of priests with them, and the priests came with the soldiers.
Right.
And the children were then forced.
I'm totally unaware of that, my goodness, okay,
yes.
Okay.
They were forced at the point
yes.
at gunpoint
yes.
to take part in religious ceremonies which were totally alien to them.
That's dreadful.
Well, history repeats itself because in Elizabeth I's reign, the King of Spain, apart from taking thousands of troops, soldiers on his boats, he also took large numbers of priests with a view to converting England back to what he regarded as the one true
religion.
The one true
faith. Was that Philip II of Spain? Was that who we're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. Interesting.
So, you see, I think that the Argentinians' interest in the Falklands is not of a material point of view at all, because they don't have a great deal to offer except sheep farming. Yeah. But it is a philosophical view, And I think God help the Falkland Islanders if the Argentinians got a permanent hold on the island.
Well, I certainly hope they don't, and I hope the freedom of the Falkland Islanders continues, because that democratic right they have and the right of self-determination absolutely has to continue. So thank you for your call, Peter. I appreciate that. And Tem is a beautiful part of the world. I must go there soon again to see my friends who live there. Wendy's been in touch as well and says police officers cannot stop rapes, stabbings and shoplifting, but they're going to get the drones and surveillance helicopters out for hose pipes. I think I'll take my chances. My rose garden is about the only English thing in my area, says Wendy. Well, thank you very much for that. Petri Hoskins coming up on the other side of the news, and we'll be here through till 1 o'clock. Hi, Petri.
Hello. How are you today?
I'm very well, yes.
Busy show.
Busy show. What's coming up in your programme yourself?
Same with me. Yeah, we've got a former Met police officer and author of How to Be a Police Officer joining us the other side of the news to talk about the Widdecombe latest stuff, all of that, what the police are doing, what they're thinking and what's happening. Also, I want to talk about the state-funded security for all MPs. That's a lot of money.
Yes.
So I'm going to be asking him what that might look like if that were to go ahead. So we're going to be looking at that. Angus Walker is joining me for a politics roundup, because there's a lot
there certainly is
on.
Yes.
Keir Starmer's last week, Andy Burnham now Prime Minister, without any